So this is now my first real time in combat. So I mean, I loved it. I'm eating it up. I mean, the first dude I shot, he was 600 yards on a motorcycle.
And you got him?
Oh yeah, I shot him. So I shot at him like 3 or 4 times. Man, as fast as I could rack that 300 Win Mag bolt, I was sending them. So we go over, we clear up to him. My boy sits up. He's got his, AK. He sits up like this right here. And I remember throwing that thing up and hitting him with that little red dot in that L-cam. Boom, his head looked like Gallagher popping a watermelon, Shot him from like about me to you.
Wow.
And I was like, I was stoked, dude. This is what every team guy dreams of, right? Sniper kills, close quarters, kills. And
do you know about how many sniper engagements you had?
I mean, maybe hundreds. They gave me an award that said for 21 sniper kills, right?
Can you describe what the damage that a 50 cal sniper round does to a human body when it's shot center mass?
It is substantial. I mean, I just can't explain it. Like, it impacts with so much. It tears the flesh, blows the bones out,
What is it that you guys do, and how do you go about it?
I guess the concept would be to catch a predator, the Chris Hansen thing. We have decoys that appear to be underage. They're not. If we talk to 1,000 people, 900 of them will just stop talking to you as soon as you tell them the age. 10% will entertain it. 10 will actually show up. And one of the things we saw is like, this guy shows up for what he thinks is a 14-year-old. He gets arrested. When we rip his phone, he had over 1,000 images, child images, but it was him having sex with his own 18-month-old daughter. We want to be able to say, report to the parking lot for the firing squad, because we've killed people overseas for a lot less.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He was a former Navy SEAL and Navy SEAL sniper. He was also a police officer, deployed multiple times in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, Navy, USMC, and Army Commendation Medals with Valor and Achievement Medals. He's the founder of the Shooting Institute, which provides tactical training to law enforcement, military, DOD, and civilians. He's the founder of the Covenant Rescue Group, which we're going to dive into, and it's an organization committed to combating human trafficking and child exploitation. He's also Rip's stunt double in Yellowstone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Jared Hudson.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
You have to have gotten that at least a time or two, right?
I have actually, though. Because my wife is all about it, right? He's got the dark beard and the dark hair. She's all about the Yellowstone. And Operation 300, I don't know if you're familiar with Aaron Vaughn's family's organization. Yeah. So I do the Frogman shoot with them every year. Just finished that one up. And actually, that's where I got these sunglasses. As a matter of fact, Gators always send us sunglasses, but they did one for him with Aaron Vaughn's initials, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
Anyway, Rip supports that organization. The guy's name's Cole Hauser. That's his name, yeah. And I got a picture. I'll send it to you or whatever y'all put it up. But my wife looked at that picture, and people were upset because he has like a red beard and like red hair. It doesn't look like the same guy at all. So it's funny you say that because yes, on the front end when people see him on TV, dark beard, all that stuff. On the back end, no. When people see the picture of me and him standing beside each other, they're like, that dude don't look like what he looks like in the show.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing movies that he was in well before Yellowstone. In fact, my uncle is a writer. He was an actor writer. I mean, he's done a ton of things, and actually wrote a movie called Paparazzi that Cole Hauser started. I think it was his first breakout movie, or one of the early ones for sure.
He played a Navy SEAL. That's the one I remember when I was a kid. It was a Navy SEAL movie with Bruce Willis. What is that movie's name?
Is it Tears of the
Tears of the Sun? That's it. Tears of the Sun. You got Tears of the Sun, and he played a Navy SEAL in that movie, and that's where I know him from. So when I first met him, I said, "Hey, look, my wife, she's all about Yellowstone and all that." I said, "But I'm going to tell you where I know you from." And my brother's the same thing. They're like, "Nah, man, that guy ain't Rip. That guy's a Navy SEAL," and in the Bruce Willis movie. Yeah, so anyway, there you go.
Oh, that's good shit. Shout out to Uncle Forey, by the way. I know he listens to some of these. So, what's the last full book that you read?
The last full book I read. So I read I'm a Christian. My faith is very important to me. I'll talk about it throughout the podcast. But I do a commentary on the Bible for each of my girls every year. So I'm working on my youngest now. I have 3 daughters, 9, 6, and 3. and I'm doing it for my youngest daughter this year. So I just finished 10 months of going through the Bible, and I will write something on every chapter. I call it a commentary loosely because it's not really a commentary. It might just be something that stands out that I'm experiencing in that moment, because I believe Scripture applies to you in the moment of your life, but it also had specific application for the time it was written in. So that's how you get context out of it. With that being said, I do that for my girls every year. So the last full book I read was the Bible, and that's every year. Normally it takes about 10 months. Did one for my wife, and I asked God about 5 years ago, I said, will you please just keep me alive to finish this for my girls? If I can live for the next 5 years, whatever happens, keep me alive to finish this for my girls, because I believe that's the most important thing. So the last full book I read was the Bible. However, I read, and I don't count these as books, and I read tons of these a month, and right now we're going through larger books. Are you familiar with the C.S. Lewis books, like the Chronicles of Narnia stuff? So my girls love stories like that. So at night when they go to bed, they lay in their bed, and I sit out in the chair, and I'll read them a chapter from a book. It was little kids' books, so I read, again, tons of those a month. But we're finishing the first book of that series. It's a 7-book series called The Magician's Nephew, and we'll be done with that. It's taken a little over a month to read it, a chapter a night when I'm with the girls. So that's where I get most of my reading in. Yeah. It's either the Bible or whatever stories I'm reading my girls, and now that they're a little bit older, I'm reading them a little more weighty or meaty stories, I guess. Yeah.
That Bible process that you walk through is pretty amazing. That's neat. That's a neat way to do it. I am curious, how do you structure reading it? Do you read it start to finish, or do you bounce around?
No, so that's good. So what I've done with them is started out with my wife's, and I did what's called it would be a timeline Bible. So the way the Bible's written is it's not necessarily written in order of how things happen, right? So you might have to bounce around through different books to match the timeline, and a lot of it's happening at the same time. A lot of these books that are written, they're all going on at the same time. Think of the prophets, for example, in the Old Testament, right? A lot of those prophets, like Isaiah, Nehemiah, Ezekiel, a lot of those are within that same time frame while Israel's going through some issues. So anyway, I'll do a timeline. Right now I'm doing a canonical, which is literally just straight through Genesis all the way through Revelation. And it's literally just one book after the other. And then I've also done a canonical, but Old Testament with New Testament. So you'll do Genesis and then a little bit of Matthew, and you just keep going through the books, but you're doing it canonically as it is in the Scripture, Matthew through Revelation, and Genesis through Haggai. Is that correct? I think Malachi is the last book of the Old Testament. So whatever it is, Genesis through the last book of the Old Testament.
Do you have a favorite book or a verse in the Bible?
So the verse that I have that would be that I write on everything. I like, if I sign something for somebody, like I wrote a little book. Every team guy writes a book, right? But mine's called The Armor of God Through the Eyes of a Navy SEAL, and I'll take all of my kit and sniper stuff. Where I just spoke at a church last weekend covering this, and I wrote a book. It's probably like 5 million on Amazon. So just look up The Armor of God Through the Eyes of a Navy SEAL. I call it Waging War in the High Places. But it's only 50 pages long. So a lot of guys make fun of me and say, hey, dude, you wrote a pamphlet. You didn't write a book, you wrote a pamphlet. But when I sign that, I'll write Joshua 1:6. My dad gave me that scripture. When I graduated high school, I was 18 years old. My dad actually did some people might think this is weird or whatever, but my dad did a knighting ceremony for me. He gave me a sword, took me through the process. Men that had guided me in my life, because I played football, baseball, that stuff, and I'm in high school. I turned 18. He says, the world considers you a man now. It's time to go out and be a man. And that was kind of how it went. And he gave me a sword that's still hanging in my office. It's got Joshua 1:6 on it. And that says, be strong and courageous. But it's the first time that God told Joshua to be strong and courageous. Joshua is arguably the greatest warrior, at least in the scripture stories. Even more so than David, Joshua conquered all of the lands that God told him to conquer. And he says, be strong and courageous. That's the first time God says it in Scripture. Most people will go with Joshua 1:9, which is like the third time I believe God says it to him. But Joshua 1:6 is the first time he said it. And this is why I think that's important, because Moses, the leader, the man of God, the guy who was actually talking with God and handing down the commandments to the Israelites, right? Moses told Joshua before he died on Mount Nebo. When I was in the SEAL teams, I actually got the privilege of going to Mount Nebo. We're doing a J set in Jordan one time. And it's a real cool area. All of that area you can go around and see. All of the people over there, they know the stories, and you can go and see where Moses split the rock, where the Red Sea was parted down in Saudi Arabia. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff. But I say all that to say, Moses told Joshua, be strong and courageous. And God told Joshua the same thing, because the man that Joshua trusted, God is now letting him know, hey, I'm the God that he trusted. Because again, that's a heavy weight to take to lead a nation like that. Yeah. And so that's why, I really cling to that verse, be strong and courageous. God gave that command, and we're to give that command to those after us. So that would be my favorite verse. Favorite book is the book of Job, because that's a hard book to understand. Without getting into it too much, Job suffered a lot, but it was actually God validating who Job said he was, because Satan was accusing Job before God, and that's what Satan's called, the accuser of the brethren. So I enjoy the book of Job because we look at all that Job suffered and say, why would God do that? Well, Job didn't see it. We see it now reading the story. God was actually validating the righteous person that Job was, because Satan said, no, he's not that righteous, God. And God says, oh, yes, he is. And he validated him through all that he suffered. So that's why I like that part.
Has your dad always been a big influence in your life?
Oh, yeah. So
is he English? Is there
Yeah. So he's, so my dad is, I think our family history, obviously Hudson being the last name, is English and Irish, and we have quite a bit of Indian blood in us. I know my grandmother's grandmother was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian, so whatever that makes me, and a lot of people in Alabama.
Your grandmother?
My grandmother's grandmother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so whatever that'd be, like double
16th.
great. Yeah, maybe a 16th, but she was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian, so we do have that, but our lineage would be English and I believe Irish is the two. But yeah, he's had a great influence in my life.
Yeah. What did he do?
He's a pastor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a pastor, and my granddaddy had a great influence in my life as well.
Hey guys, I wanted to take a minute to tell you about the Mic Drop Patreon, where you can get the real mic drop experience the way it's meant to be seen. You get completely uncensored, unfiltered, and uncut episodes with nothing held back, just raw, real conversations directly from me to you, without YouTube censorship. Plus, you'll see it days before anyone else, with early premieres and exclusive bonus content that you won't find anywhere else. You get behind-the-scenes access to the show, including pre- and post-show footage, with me and the guest both in studio and on location, depending on what the guest is into and what we have going on. On top of that, we've got tons of Patreon-only perks, mic drop swag, access to exclusive merch, and the chance to submit your questions to be asked at the end of every episode. You'll also get a sneak peek at our upcoming guests, so you'll know who's in the studio weeks before anyone else. We're constantly releasing new features and dropping new content based on what you want to see. For our top-tier members, you get the same mic drop challenge coin that all of my guests receive from the upcoming show, which will never, ever be for sale. We've got quarterly merch that's sent out directly to you, a monthly Zoom call with me where we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, and an active group chat where we all shoot the shit on a daily basis. All of that for just a few bucks a month to support the show. Right now, we're also offering a 10% discount off an annual subscription, which means that you get more than a free month. I want to say thank you to everyone who has already signed up. Your support means that we get to keep bringing you the content that you love. So if you haven't yet, hit the link in the description or go to patreon.com/micdrop and join the team. I'll see you guys in there. Thank you.
Team Dog, premium meals designed to keep your dog healthy, happy, and strong, to improve digestion, boost energy, and support a shiny coat. Non-GMO ingredients, no fillers, no gluten, no corn, no seed oils, and no soy. Just pure, high-quality ingredients to fuel your dog's best life. It was crafted by experts, made for your dog, Navy SEAL K-9 trainer, and nutritionists. Team Dog Food, where no piece goes to waste.
What's something you wish you were better at?
God, there's so many things I wish I was better at. I wish I was better at articulating the things I believe, like, what I actually believe, my faith. The reason is because I use this example a lot. Maximus says, what you do in this life echoes in eternity. I do believe there's an eternity. he almost gets it right. How you transact with Christ in this life echoes in eternity. I wish I was better at articulating that. I heard the guy on the Joe Rogan podcast, the Canadian kid. Did you listen to that? That's talking about the Bible and stuff, and like, dude, the amount of knowledge this dude had on, honestly, the most important thing, eternity. I wish I was better at articulating that. That'd be the first thing. The second thing is I wish I was better at turning work off when I get home with my wife and my girls, because it's like, I can turn my mind off and go to sleep, and my wife's like, you seem like you're stressed out. It's not stress. It's really not stress. I'm not worried about, whatever, dumb things. But I'm worn out. Yeah. And if I could just turn off work and enjoy my wife and my girls, or enjoy this hunt that I'm on, or enjoy my time fishing and just turn it all off, that would, I think that would make me feel less tired.
Yeah. You got to take a page out of a dog's book in that regard.
Yeah,
yeah. One of my favorite way to open, like when I do speaking events that have anything to do with dogs, is if you want to find out who loves you more, your wife or your dog, lock both of them in the trunk of your car.
Yeah,
for
that's
2
right.
hours.
Yeah.
You come back, pop the trunk open. Who's happier to see you?
100%, bro.
Well, it's a joke. It's 100% what you're talking about. Is the being present is difficult. We're so. We're rational and logical minded, but we're forward thinkers, and unlike really any other animal or mammal on the planet, there's not that same level of forethought.
Right.
So it is tough, but super important. And how old are your kids?
9, 6, and 3.
Yeah. I mean, they're at such a good age to exercise that
right.
Character trait, and but it is difficult, because I will say, like, mine are 18 and 20, both girls. And
I got 3
that
girls.
shit goes so quick, man.
Yeah, man,
everybody said that, and it's hard to hear that when they're, especially toddlers, and you're chasing them around. They're
coloring all over the walls, and
they're wearing your ass out.
Yeah.
And some guy 10, 15 years older is like, hey, enjoy that shit. It goes quick. And you're like, fuck you.
That's
like,
right.
You don't even want to hear it.
I haven't had more than 4 hours of sleep in the last
the
week.
last thing you want to hear is enjoy something that's kicking your ass. But it's true. It goes.
I have a question. You just said something, and you might be able to answer this, especially with your background with animals or with dogs, right? Do you think that the reason maybe, let's say, a dog or any of these animals that they don't have that same issue, right? You said take a page out of a dog's book, is because they don't, oftentimes in the world we live in, we don't have any real problems, so we create problems. We create friction unnecessarily, and versus the dog, they don't create friction at all, right?
Well, they do. But so to me, I would say even looking at it that way is the classic example of what we would call anthropomorphism, which is attaching human emotion and logic and reason to animals, which they don't have. And I think, this is just my, perspective on it, is that it's actually way simpler than that. And this would be true for all animals, is the one thing that separates human beings from all other animals is what?
Maybe emotion.
Well, it's language, really.
Oh, language, okay.
So if you think about just in the amount of time that we've been sitting here, yes, emotion, but animals do have emotion. You can see, proof with elephants grieving their dead, or dogs show emotion all the time. I mean, most animals do. You could even argue that reptiles and fish and things, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe we have an inability to actually recognize them showcasing it. I mean, who knows? It's a rabbit hole you could go down for hours. But the language thing is important, because I think so many times where I see people stumble with, especially training their own dog, is that they're thinking of things from the human perspective and not the dog's perspective. And if you put yourself in a dog's shoes for just 10 seconds and think, again, going back to the amount of information you and I have passed just in the 10 minutes we've been sitting here, is significant.
Yeah.
Right? But how much of that exchange of information had anything to do with body language, volume, tone, inflection, emotion, presence? Very little. Right? So with an animal, they don't even think in a language. Like, think about that for a second. Like, your dog doesn't rationalize you coming through the door with an internal monologue the way you and I do. And so I think all animals' ability to be present and in the moment and not cry over spilt milk or have anxiety about what's to come, with some exceptions. You can see dogs with anxiety in other animals, but it's very compartmentalized and very specific to certain contexts. But they don't have that ability. So, their mind, one of the things I say in all of my, whether it's online training or the training books or seminars or whatever, is a dog's mind works more like a calculator than it does our mind. Everything for them is A plus B equals C. They're making a very simple association with things, and that's how they navigate the world, So it's hard to even imagine going through your day where you don't think in a language, you don't dream in a language, you don't have, you're not shit talking somebody behind them in line in a language. Animals don't have that ability to do that, and so I think it's actually more that than it is anything.
You think it's language. It's funny you say that, and this has popped in my head going back to, again, I'll talk about my faith and what I believe throughout this, but in the Bible, John chapter 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Yeah. And it goes all the way down to verse 14. It says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among men. The Word is Jesus Christ, at least is what the Bible teaches. So that's interesting that you say, so language is the delineating or separating factor in your mind. And that's pretty powerful, man. I almost want to do a study on that.
Well, yeah, because, there's the other physical characteristics. The human brain percentage-wise is bigger than all other animals. Yeah. I've heard or read that dolphins are similar in a lot of ways, unlike dogs or horses or anything else. But, so for sure there's a cerebral or, cognition component to humans being far advanced, and that of course plays a role. But I think that that's why we have language the way that we do, and other animals don't. Now there's a huge component of nonverbal communication and body language. That's how animals primarily communicate, is in that regard. And no different than the same way you or I could walk into a restaurant and see a guy that's looking at you a little longer than you'd like, or sizing you up, or there's just something about somebody that either rubs you wrong or gives you an uneasy feeling. Our ability to navigate those types of nonverbal communication skills are embarrassingly low by comparison to especially dogs, but all animals. Their ability to read body language and the nuances of nonverbal communication absolutely, blow us out of the water. So I think it's a combination of those things. But
that's interesting. I didn't mean to derail that question, but I just somehow.
No, I mean, with my involvement in dogs, a lot of the feedback we get is people want more dog content. So no, it's all good. If time travel were possible, where and when would you go and why?
Man, I don't know if I've thought of that.
And it can be forward or back.
Bro, if I'm just being honest, I'm very content where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
I can't think of anywhere that I would want to go. Let me think. I think at least my idea of what Hollywood has presented, which we know is not true, I think the Wild West, to me, is probably what I would lean to the most.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know if Hollywood's, the perception that I have of it, I don't know if it's accurate. But so I guess maybe if I went back in time, at least what we perceive was, or is the Wild West as we see it now. I think that would probably be what I'd want to do. That's, again, going back to if talking about SEAL teams and deployments and stuff, especially Afghanistan. 2009 to 2011, at least when I was there. I'm sure at the start of the war, when I was still in high school, they had more freedom, but it was way better than Iraq was. It was like the Wild West. It was complete freedom, and I do desire that complete freedom. But I'll be honest, I'm very content where I'm at.
Yeah.
Trying to do what, the things that I do now.
Yeah, no, it's the first answer like that. So that's, a lot of people say World War II or the Revolutionary War, or even during Jesus' time to see what he was like, but.
He said that you talk about Jesus' time, Scripture says that God has placed each man in his specific time so that he might reach out and find God. So the reason we're sitting here now is because when God created the world in the beginning was the Word, right? That means logos, so that's the written word and the unwritten word, or the plan of God, and then the actual let there be light, the spoken word of God. So that's kind of the rudimentary understanding that I have of logos. I'm sure somebody way smarter than me could probably break it down even more, right? Yeah. But when it says that, he at that time when he created it, he put Mike, Jared, my girls, all of us in the time we're in, so that we had the best opportunity to reach out and take hold of what God was offering, which is eternal life in our broken, sin-fallen, downtrodden world. So that's why I think it is important to be content where you are at.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I feel that way.
Yeah. No, it's great answer. EDC wise, what are you typically rocking?
Yeah. So normally I carry a SIG 365 with an enclosed emitter red dot, the Hudson enclosed emitter red dot. Man, I've tested a lot of them. Obviously doing the contract, teaching the pistol carbine stuff for the SEAL team, still doing training for all these different DoD units and law enforcement. Being a law enforcement myself, I have run a lot of different red dots, and that it's a compact carry. It's called a compact, and it's an enclosed emitter Hudson red dot that I run on a SIG 365 macro. I don't know if everybody's familiar with a macro, but that's what I run. I love rocking that, and I've got a little Winkler. It's not the SD2. It's the operator. The one with the curved handle.
Yeah.
I think it's called the operator 2. I run that Winkler. Right here. Along with that is a fixed blade carry, and that's normally what I carry every day because I still work law enforcement. I have a backpack that has a SIG 320 with that drop-in. What's it called? I think it's called a Raider. You know what I'm talking about? The drop-in thing that makes it kind of like a SBR.
Oh, yeah.
With a suppressor on the end of it, and I've got supers and subs on my magazine. It kind of looks like a little MP7 maybe.
Yeah.
And I got supers and subs in it. Got my kit, my level 4 plates, my kit to hold the magazines. Flashbang, a little smoke. My blowout kit, all of the stuff I need, and I'll leave that in my truck most of the time when I'm going around, because at any point in time we might get a call for an active shooter, and I've at least got a rifle to respond with. And so those would be my EDC carries. The other one would be I got a Honey Badger, like a little rifle with supers and subs for 300 blackout, with a full kit loadout if I get a TAC call out, because I work on the TAC team back home.
Yeah. Do you have a preferred carry ammo?
No, I just shoot ball, to be honest
Really?
with you. Yeah, I shoot ball. Now, when I was doing stuff for the state of Alabama, we're doing a lot of vehicle interdictions. They required that we carry, I think the ammo was G9, but it was that one that looks like a drill bit, because we're doing a lot of vehicle stuff and it goes through the windshields.
Is it like the Hornady critical defense type stuff?
No, so the Hornady critical defense, a lot of agencies require that to be carried, but it's got the little red tip on it.
Yeah.
And it's so you don't have a lot of bleed over if you're shooting through something or somebody, you're not going to have bleed over and risk hitting anybody else. But, and I carried that some, but normally I just carry ball, and I'll carry weapon systems because I do run suppressed most of the time, with the exception of my regular pistol. I carry supers and subs. So if, let's say I pulling out my regular pistol to rock it, if I'm worried about shooting through something, or whatever, I might run subs in it if that's an issue. But most of the time I just run ball ammunition.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Ball generally hits better, like the 124 grain NATO balls like we ran in the teams. I've seen more consistency with it across the board versus those super fast 77 grain ones that look like a drill bit. They hit higher. Now the weight is lower, but it's just pistol rounds. They hit a lot higher as I get out to maybe 20, 25 meters. And then the Hornady critical defense, I've seen it. The problem is if I'm shooting into a vehicle, especially as law enforcement, you have a lot of that energy dispersed on that initial plane of glass, because it's like your body armor it's like a shatter plate, right? If you do level 4s, the ceramic is a shatter plate, so it disperses a lot of that energy. Then the Kevlar, whatever it is behind it, is what catches it. It's the same thing in a vehicle. That initial impact on the glass is like a shatter plate. So if you're shooting something that's not going to bleed through, you run into issues engaging vehicles. So ball just seems to work the best for not having too much bleed over, but also enough to punch through things if I have to shoot through things.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's super solid logic for sure, especially with your day-to-day, routine. Did you know that when your metabolism is working properly, you can feel the benefits in literally every aspect of your life? Well, good news. I've found an invaluable tool that helps give me insight to create an improved metabolism for my body, and it's called Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that helps measure your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it will tell you if it sees if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to help improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and the Lumen can tell you what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then, Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals. So Lumen can tell you exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep on top of your wellness game. Now, Lumen was kind enough to send me one of their metabolic trackers to try out, and it's been an absolute game changer. Being able to track my carb burn every morning has helped with my diet. It's helped with my fitness routines, and I cannot recommend it enough. Remember, your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic wellness translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, etc. Lumen gives you recommendations to help improve your metabolic wellness. It can also track your cycle as well out there, ladies, at the onset of menopause and adjust your recommendations to keep your metabolism in good shape through hormonal shifts so you can keep up your energy and stave off those cravings. Take the next step in helping to improve your health. Go to lumen.me/micdrop to get 20% off your Lumen device. That's lumen, lumen.me/micdrop. All caps, all one word, for 20% off your purchase. Thank you to Lumen for sponsoring this episode. These statements and products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition. Hey guys, you know sleep is one of the cornerstones to health, to recovery, to productivity. For a number of years, I've struggled with getting a good night's sleep and being able to wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Especially when I have a busy recording schedule, got all the dog stuff, the Warrior Dog Foundation, rolling, training, etc. The day-to-day for me, just like with a lot of people, really takes it out of you and requires that you get a good night's sleep to be able to tackle that next day. Helix Sleep was kind enough to send me a Helix Dusk Elite king-size mattress, and I got to tell you, it's been an absolute game changer for me for being able to fall asleep fast, stay asleep, and wake up feeling ready to take on the next day. I will say, going back from the mattress I was on before to the Helix is night and day. The ability to stay cool, they have cooling technology. It's basically waterproof or water resistant, stain resistant. And I will say the level of firmness is that perfect mix of not too hard, not too soft, and gives me the ability to get a really, really good night's sleep. Go to helixsleep.com/micdrop for 20% off the entire site. That's helixsleep.com/micdrop for 20% off site-wide. helixsleep.com/micdrop. When the internet goes dark, radio still works. Your smartphone relies on the grid, but when the power goes out or the internet crashes, both are useless. Sea Crane's CC Skywave SSB2 helps give you access to critical communications your phone can't. That includes emergency single-side band transmissions used in disasters, both natural and man-made, so you are never left in the dark. Sea Crane was kind enough to send me my own SSB2 to try out, and it's been rock solid. It's got crystal clear reception. It's compact form factor to fit in any go bag, clock, alarm, headphone jack, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee, and it's an American-based company to boot. When normal communication fails, radio is your survival. The SSB2 is built for that moment. Compact, powerful, crystal clear, pulls in signals most radios can't even touch. Whether it's AM, FM, weather alerts, worldwide ham operators, you can stay informed because in a crisis, knowledge is power. This isn't just a radio, it's your lifeline, and Sea Crane has the performance that matters. To order the SSB2, call Sea Crane's U.S.-based customer service at 1-800-522-8863 or visit seacrane.com/drop. That's ccrane, ccrane.com/drop, and use the code DROP, all caps, all one word, at checkout for 10% off orders over $75. As you know, as I've said a number of times, how important sleep is. We've all struggled with being able to get to sleep, stay asleep, wake up feeling refreshed. You know, that struggle, I think, is something that's very common with most people, and it's something that I find a lot of people talk about and want a solution to. That's why I am so excited to share something that's made a real difference in my life, sleep-related, and that's Beam's Dream Powder. Beam's been a long-time sponsor. As I said, of this podcast, they've sent me their Dream Powder in the past. I've used it for a long time, and it is fantastic. Beam is proudly founded in America and run by people who share our values of hard work, integrity, and delivering results. It's a science-backed, healthy nighttime blend packed with ingredients shown to improve sleep so you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. Dream has been a game changer for me, and it's made with a powerful blend of all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. It's designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling refreshed. And I'm not the only one. Beam has already improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep, helping people across the country wake up and feel their best. What I love most about Beam is it's an American company. It's built here, it's run here, and it's supporting brands like this that's important to me because it's about more than just the product. It's about the backing of hardworking people and companies who are doing things the right way. So here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of 40% off to try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time if you go to shopbeam.com/micdrop and use the code micdrop at checkout. That's shopbeam, BEAM.com/micdrop, all caps, all one word, and use that code micdrop for up to 40% off. Support an American company, invest in yourself, and start getting your best sleep tonight. Speaking of routines, what does your morning routine look like? What time do you get up, and what's the first 3 hours look like?
Yeah, so it varies depending on my travel, depending on where we're at. But let's just say at home in the office, I'll get up at depends on when the 3-year-old comes down and wakes up. Sometimes it's early, and I'll put her in bed with us. But normally I get up between 5:30 and 6:30, just depending on what the night before looked like with kids or whatever it is. But between 5:30 and 6:30. I'll get up, I'll grab my stuff, which is normally ready to go, and I'll go to the office. And the first thing I'll do for about an hour of the day is I'll get in the Bible, because it's a lot of reading and a lot of writing, and I'll do that, my morning devotional, my Bible study. And around 7:30 or 8, I'll have a cup of coffee when I do this. I normally don't eat until about lunchtime. Sometimes I'll eat beforehand, but normally I don't eat till about 12. And not for any other reason. Everybody's, intermittent fasting and all that. I'll be honest, when I wake up in the morning, most of the time I don't feel very hungry. So I'll get into the office work of the day, maybe meet with the team, go through things, read contracts, do all that normal office stuff. If I go to the range and train, which I try to do 2 days a week when I'm in town, it'll be around lunchtime or a little after. Come back to the office, try to wrap things up, get home between 4 and 6 o'clock, depending on what meetings I have and what's going on. I'll normally work out because I got all the weights and stuff at home. I'll work out for about 30 minutes to an hour. The girls like to play downstairs while I work out, so that's easy. And eat dinner, put the girls to bed, reading their stories, spend a little time with the wife, and go to bed. Yeah. Try to be in bed by 10 o'clock. Yeah. So that would be a normal day in my life when I'm home. Here, I got up first thing in the morning, did my Bible study because it just came in last night, right, and went and ran on the treadmill because I knew I wasn't going to be able to today, and then did some office work and then came over here to you. So it kind of ebbs and flows.
Yeah. Pretty organized schedule for sure.
Try to be as much as possible, right?
Where are you originally from?
So I was born in Lynchburg, Virginia, and we lived there until I was about 4. That's where part of my family's from, but Birmingham, Alabama would be the big city. We live a little bit north of there, and so I spent my whole life in Alabama.
Yeah. Dad was a pastor. Grandfather had a big influence.
He did.
Did you play football growing up?
I did. Played football, baseball. We didn't have a wrestling team, but football coaches made us all wrestle during the off season because it kept us in better shape, right? Just the normal stuff, hunted, fished, normal kid from North Jefferson County, Alabama,
Siblings?
Oh, yeah, I got 2 brothers and a sister, and they all have kids now and everything, and we're pretty close as a family, which is something that I'm surprised. We hear from people, hey, man, we can't believe y'all all get together almost every Friday night with all the kids and everything at my mom and dad's house. So, like, these families have a lot of friction. And there might be some friction in our family, but for the most part, we are pretty close as a family.
Yeah.
Still.
In that kind of growing up phase, being heavily influenced by your father, what was the catalyst for deciding that you wanted to join the military? And what did that look like?
Well, it was my dad. So on that one, when I graduated high school, I was in the 10th grade when September 11th went down. So that was 2001. I was in the 10th grade, and that Monday, I think it was Tuesday that it actually happened. It must have been the Friday night before, but we had lost a football game. I remember, and my world was, that crushed me, right? Second game of the season we lost, and I'm going through this, and then I see what happened on September 11th, and I remember as a kid thinking, okay, this football game's nothing compared to the loss that we just sustained. And I wanted to go to the military at that point in time. I wanted to go to the military, fight for our country. Probably the same thing you had or anybody else that we know. We want to support our country because of what we saw on September 11th.
I was actually at Team 3 when it happened.
Were you at Team 3 when it happened? Yeah. All right, well, there you go. Yeah. So even more so. You don't have a lot of gray in your beard, so
that's manufactured.
There you go. Okay, there you go.
There's more in it than you see. For sure.
So but all that being said, couldn't go at that point in time. I saw the firefighters doing what they were doing too, and I was like, man, I really think being a firefighter was cool. So the one thing I could do, I went and volunteered at the local fire department. They brought me in, sent me to classes, and got hooked in the firefighter thing. And as soon as I graduated high school, I went to fire college and became a full-time firefighter. But I did that for 1 year before I went to the SEAL teams. And basically, my dad, I had a few options. I could have walked on and played ball, get a walk-on scholarship at a school in Virginia, Liberty. That was a potential option, but it didn't cover everything. I wasn't good enough at sports to have a full ride. And my dad basically said, hey, look, you didn't apply yourself in sports or academics. You want to go to school, you want to pay for your school, you're doing a good thing as a firefighter, but you need to think about the military. So after much prayer and deliberation, I went on a mission trip with a church. I came back. He took me to each recruiter. He said, I'll support you. I'll take you to the recruiters and let you talk to them. And had no desire to be a SEAL. I actually kind of wanted to be a Ranger from the Black Hawk Down movie. And the hardest contract to get, though, was the SEAL contract. My dad told me, he said, you can join the regular military, that's fine, but I encourage you to do something different, do something special. Now, I didn't know at the time when you get to Buzz, the old grinder, what it said, be something special, right? You remember that on the old grinder? And so anyway, he said that, and I said, all right, well, this is what I'll do. I'll just take the test for the SEAL contract, and if I don't pass that one, then I'll go. The next was Air Force PJ. The next was the Ranger, option, and the X-ray, I think is what the Green Beret one was called. And then the Marine MARSOC one, they didn't really have MARSOC at that time. You just had to go Marine Infantry. That would have been the last one. And passed the SEAL test. Went out, took the test, did the written test, passed it. It was pretty easy, passed the physical test, and that was kind of what moved me on that trajectory to the SEAL teams.
Yeah. It's an interesting but strategic way to go about it that makes a lot of sense, that I think most of us are more romanticized by it than logical, I think. But I like that process.
Now, I was romanticized by the SEAL team.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that. There was that allure, of like, man, these guys are the real deal. But it was just, hey, if I don't do this, then I'll go to the next one. Because all of them to me, and I still believe this, obviously I'm beholden to the SEAL teams, right? We're the best of the best. But all of them to me, it was like, man, if you could be any one of those warriors, right? Some of the greatest warriors on the face of the planet, why would you not want to be a part of that as a true red-blooded American man?
Yeah, no, I agree. I've had obviously a ton of team guys on here, so we won't go too far into the training and the whole pipeline, with the exception of if there's anything that stands out as being remarkable, exceptional, or something that was truly impactful during that entire process before you checked into the SEAL teams.
That I won't say there was anything impactful, but it was way harder than I expected it to be, because I could meet all the physical standards before you got there, no problem. But and people will say, oh, wow, it's a 6-month program. You get the weekends off. They think of it like a boot camp where you're stuck, right? And that weekend off that actually made it harder, because crap, I got to show back up on Monday. And I tell this to my parents now, and everybody laughs about it. But when I was a kid, I went to bed every night afraid of what I was going to do the next day that was going to get me a spanking. I remember that. My dad would wear me out. My mom would wear me out. I remember thinking that, like, every day was, are they going to find out that I did this today and I'm going to get spanked tomorrow? What am I going to do tomorrow to get spanked for? But I can't think of a day that I really didn't get a spanking for doing something as a kid, Yeah. That's what every day of BUD/S felt like.
Yeah.
Every day you go to bed, you're afraid of what you're going to have to do the next day, because it's so hard. Oh, and by the way, you've still got to meet the standard. So now the standard that was easy to meet before I'm being really put to the test, well, now I've got to be put to the test, and I still have to meet that standard. And that was probably the most eye-opening thing to me. And I saw a lot of guys that I would have considered they were unbelievable athletes. They didn't make it through the program.
Yeah.
Not because they couldn't physically hack it, but because when they saw that they sucked more than they thought they sucked, they bounced out. So I would say that was the biggest thing about the selection program that was eye-opening to me. The other side of it was in Psalms. David talks about you're knit in your mother's womb. Everybody says, oh, yeah, it's the training that made you this way or that. No, it's not. And I learned this in BUD/S. And even all through the SEAL teams. It's a selection process that finds the person that they want to train. It's not something that makes you something that's trainable and they can train. It's very calculated. They are selecting an individual who is already this individual, and this is the program, the pipeline that finds it.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but it works for the most part, because when I got out of the SEAL teams and I got into law enforcement, what I noticed about law enforcement, I got a lot of good friends in law enforcement, still in law enforcement, but the commonality in the law enforcement world is a turd, as we would call them in the teams, or somebody that sucks. And the rarity is a good dude that you could trust.
Really?
In the SEAL teams, the rarity was a turd, right? And oftentimes they were found out when they got to a team anyway. But the rarity was a turd or somebody who sucks, and the commonality was a good dude who you could trust, to be with you in a gunfight. That was and I didn't see that obviously until I got out, but even with that pipeline does a pretty dang good job, better than most other pipelines I think that are out there, of selecting the individual.
Do you think that that assessment of law enforcement of the turd being the norm and the shit hot guy being the exception is nationwide?
Yeah, because I work with agencies all over the nation, both with the nonprofit and with the for-profit company with what we do. I would say yes from what I've seen. Now, it's also not necessarily a disparagement on the individual officers that are there, because most of the time it is the leadership that's the problem. We need some of the issues you have with the SEAL teams now, or special operations as a whole, or look at our nation, look at the DEI push. It's from the leadership level. It's not the dudes who are actually doing the work a lot of times, but leadership often begets who they are. They're going to pick somebody who's not better than them. If I'm a leader and I can't meet this standard, I definitely don't want to pick somebody who can supersede me in standard. Why? Because they're going to command more respect.
Shit, I do.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
I would much rather surround myself with people way better than me.
That's right. That's right. But oftentimes, especially within government, I've seen it more so in law enforcement, right? That person at the top doesn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Because this person right here, if he's better, it's now in their little world, their little fiefdom. It's a problem to them, because he could be elevated over me.
I think that's such a backwards way to look at it, and I get that, there's obviously a disparity between government jobs and the civilian sector, but to me, it's like even in the government where, your bottom line is not kind of the difference between surviving or not.
Yeah.
You're not making money in the government, you're spending it, and you have a task to complete, and how good you are at that task is what, kind of dictates your reputation. But even with that, I mean, it's like if you surround yourself with superstars, it's going to make you look good if you're the one running the show, even if they're better than you. I mean, especially if they're better than you at everything. Like it's still just going to make you look good. I think that insecurity and that fragile fucking ego that too many guys in these lines of work possess, I think is such a detriment to the community.
It's that fragile ego that you're talking about. And yet they're the first ones that'll say, oh, check your ego at the door. If you've got to say it, it ain't true. That's something my daddy always used to say.
It's like being in charge.
Yeah. If you got to say it, it ain't true.
Yeah.
Check your ego at the door. That's the first thing it tells me. You probably have an ego. Yeah. Maybe not always, but generally speaking, that does. And arrogance is fully embodied in that person who wants people to believe that there's something that they're not. Arrogance is not, hey, I'm really good at this. I can do this job really good. Arrogance is, I'm really good at this, but I actually can't do the job. The best one, the best example I've seen, because I had to do some debriefs on this with law enforcement agents across the nation, is that Uvalde school shooting, right? Uvalde showed up. They were choke slamming parents outside. I mean, we've seen it. You got finally the Border Patrol guy got there and went in and smoked the dude. But you have law enforcement say, we got this under control, yet a whole classroom full of kids are being shot up and they're standing out there doing nothing. I would say that is going to be the common response of law enforcement. Then you have that guy in Nashville. Remember that kid in Nashville? Is his name Erzberger?
I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. So whatever that young man's name was, I got a video of it still on my phone. He showed up, and if you watch his clearance on his body cam, clearance looked good for the most part. We can nitpick some stuff with it, but clearance looked good. He had equipment that I know wasn't department issued. It was personally bought, because generally speaking, it was department issue, at least the optic on his gun and everything. And he moved up there and he shot the bad guy. And people are like, hey, Nashville PD, I think, was it Nashville PD or was it the sheriff's office there? Whoever it was, they're the ones that know how. I said, no, they're not the ones who set the standard. That young officer right there, who was a former Marine, he set the standard of what should be done. So that individual responsibility is vitally important, and I've seen in the law enforcement world, and obviously we're seeing now in the military world with what Trump's doing with the DEI stuff and all that. Pete Hegseth, they're trying to weed out a lot of stupidity. But definitely in the law enforcement world, I've seen that the leadership, they don't meet that standard. And when the leadership doesn't meet that standard, it's hard to drive an organization or a group of people to meet that same standard or supersede that standard.
Yeah, it's frustrating for sure to see, especially in the government, whether it's all the way up at the federal level, law enforcement, state, local, whatever. But all right, so you get through BUD/S harder than you kind of thought it was going to be in some respects. And then you first checked into Team 3, right?
Yeah, I checked into Team 3, yep.
And how many deployments did you do total?
It would have been 3. Well, our last deployment, we went to like 9 different countries. So I have 3 Sea Service deployment ribbons, if I remember right. But we were in and out for a whole year, because it was around that time where they're doing those year-long deployments. Went to Yemen, went to Bahrain, went to Korea. Half the team went to Afghanistan, went back to Bahrain. So we were in and out. So, what I learned, the reason I say it like that, what I learned is a guy in the Army will say, yeah, I did 9 deployments, but he counts almost every time his, airplane left the U.S. But for us, regular Sea Service deployment, those 6-month deployments, 3 deployments. I did 3 pumps, and then I was, out of Team 3.
What year was the first one?
I always say 2007, but I think it was actually 2008. I checked in. It was the Sauder City deployment for Team 3, and I checked in, and I believe that was actually 2008. Went over to Iraq for a very, very short amount of time and got pulled to Group 1 and went to Germany for the what's it called when we go to like different countries, to the decompression stop. That's right. Gotcha. And I worked under Group 1, the Commodore, the Master Chief, and all them in Germany, setting up that decompression stop, driving the brass around to Stuttgart and Ramstein and all that. So I did that for 3 months and then came back home, and went to sniper school and did a workup, deployed to Afghanistan, went to a bunch of other schools after that, and did a workup and deployed to, we were going to Iraq, and then they shut Iraq down in 2011, right? And then we went to, where did we go after that? Went to Jordan to do a JSET, and we went to Bahrain, and we went all through that process, and had guys in Afghanistan, went to Yemen, went to, did all the stuff. I was upset at the time because the boys were getting in Afghanistan, and you want to go get it in Afghanistan like you did the previous deployment, because every good team guy wants to be at war. We want to be shooting people with our sniper guns. We want to be fighting the fight. And but now, hindsight being 2020, we took down a ship, which was a pretty cool call out. Not a lot of team guys, got to do that anymore. We were standing by. Remember when the Benghazi stuff happened? I called him Senior Chief Woods. He was a buzz instructor. We went through all those guys over there. We were overseas when that happened, and I won't say we were necessarily spun up, but everybody was aware, right? Because everybody's trying to pull anybody they can to help with that. So anyway, that was a cool deployment, I guess. Now being almost a 40-year-old man, looking back at it, I got a lot of experiences. Korea, probably one of my favorite places I've ever been. Working in South Korea with the Rock SEALs, we dove in the ocean and found it's when they shot those missiles over. And the Rock SEALs were diving. We dove with them, and they found it. They brought it in, and I'm like, I don't know what a nuclear weapon looks like, but I guess in my mind, that's what it looks like. It's as long as, almost as long as this room. And it looked like a rocket, like you would see in the movies, That was really a cool experience. So anyway, that's kind of a quick rundown of my training and deployment and SEAL teams deployment.
So it sounds like the first Afghanistan deployment was kind of the Rock'em Sock'em.
Oh man, it was great.
What? So was there an explanation or kind of a precursor to deploying where they sat you down and said, here's kind of the 30,000 foot view of what's going on in country, and here's where you guys fit into that?
They did, and I think it was Team 7 that did it first, and then Team 1 was deployed, and then we checked in. So we got a brief from Team 7, and it was it started off with, it wasn't a unilateral mission, it wasn't the commando mission that we ultimately took over, it wasn't the VSO mission before all that stuff happened. It was, you're literally rolling all over country, primarily in Kandahar with the Marines that were getting hit every day trying to build white space, and we're literally going all over the country acting as running ops, looking for specific people, so very much targeting and doing QRFs for both special operations and conventional forces. So literally was countrywide. That's what Team 7 did almost their entire deployment. That's what Team 1 did almost their entire deployment. We did that for part of the deployment, so that was originally what we were briefed on. When we got there, we did that a little bit, did a lot of ops with the DEA. We were mentioned, hey, you're going to be working with the DEA, is it FAST guys, the Fast Action Response Team, whatever it was. They were burning poppy fields and all that stuff. So we were doing that with them, and then directive came down that attached us to Siege of Sodef, and I guess we were already attached kind of to Siege of Sodef, but came down and they, long story short, we got pushed out on sort of a VSO mission and did that. And Team 1 did some of that too. It wasn't VSO at the time, but we were just living with the ANA and the A&P in their compound. We built a compound in Nabahar. Our sister platoon, Alpha, they went up north to Fob Lane, and we still ran ops out of there, but we also were developing white space in those areas. Where we were at, we then got rebriefed on, hey, you're cutting off the rat lines. These are fighters coming out with poppy and all that stuff to take into Pakistan. We're right on the Pakistani border where we're at in Nabahar. And then new fighters coming in with weapons and all of that stuff, and we were set up our fob right between their rat lines. So that turned into now base defense because, dude, these dudes, there was at one time like 2 months straight, we were attacked twice a day, every day of the week, whether we rolled an op out the night before or whatever. And that was pretty cool. It was kind of like the Alamo, defending the Alamo.
Well, like throughout that entire deployment, I mean, it sounds like there were almost kind of different phases to it.
There were.
Going back to the first phase, are there any operations during that first phase that stand out as being exceptionally memorable?
I guess the one where I broke my back, and I didn't know I broke my back until we got back and X-rayed it. I'll try not to use any of the guys' names, but basically we're doing a DEA fast team operation. We went in nighttime hours or early morning hours. It was dark. Set up our sniper hides. Had a village clearance going on down there. We had to clear through some areas and get set up on a mountain, and that's what I was a part of with a handful of us. And this is with them. I mean, this is in like the first week or two in country, and the first handful of ops. I'm really doing. Because you got to remember when I checked into Iraq and then went over to Germany. There wasn't as a new team guy. I hadn't really done much, right? Just because you're in a country where combat is going on doesn't mean you're actually in combat. And so this is now my first real time in combat. So I mean, I loved it. I'm eating it up. And so we set up sniper hides, but that the bird that was doing like a one-wheel landing, we didn't know it at the time, but we're getting shot at, so it kind of does a one-wheel. We're throwing stuff in, and I stand up on Eric's shoulders, clip my sniper rifle bag in. I'm hanging on this, and all of a sudden the bird just starts going in a spin. Well, it was shot in the tail rotor with they were shooting us with PKM, ground fire down below, and it flung me out of the bird. It knocked me out. Eric comes down there, and a handful, he's like, "Bro, are you all right?" I'm like, kind of ears ringing, a little bit of a concussion, and picks me up, puts me in the bird. When I got X-ray later, I'd actually broken my back, but I was still able to operate and everything. No problem. Haven't had any major issues. Haven't had to have surgery from it, but it broke my, I think it was L2 and L3, the vertebrae and the facets. Because I rebroke it again on another op, a year later. But either way, that's the thing that's the most memorable. I have some pictures of it still. My wife has some pictures of it we took from the hide site. But yeah, I broke my back on that op. But being just my first combat op, man, it was just everything that I desired. Everything I want to be. Young, 21-year-old team guy, up there with sniper rifles and machine guns, just, ready to lay waste to the world.
Yeah. Were there, in that kind of first phase of operations, were you doing a lot of sniper stuff? Were there a lot of gunfights?
When there were. So there'd be gunfights in the village. They'd find our sniper hide, and they would, kind of shoot at us a little bit. But there were a lot of gunfights from the sniper hides. Just depending on where you were too, right? Depends on how much white space had been previously developed. In a lot of places we started going, there was no white space developed. Now, with that being said, I wouldn't call them protracted gunfights. Might be in a sniper hide, might be getting shot at, and then you find somebody, you dust them with your sniper gun and move on. I would say most of our engagements, at least most of my engagements there initially were, the first dude I shot, he was 600 yards on a motorcycle. So it was a pretty far engagement. We were still getting shot at from a couple different hide sites.
And you got him?
Oh, yeah, I shot him. So I shot at him like 3 or 4 times and missed. There was, laughing. All they heard was, man, as fast as I could rack that 300 Win Mag bolt, I was sending them. And he turned, and when he turned, he slowed down enough, and I was able to shoot his bike out from under him. Had an AK, had some saddlebags and stuff, wound up being all these IED materials, HME and the mortar fuses. And he got behind this one little thing. It was like a wall. The old busted down walls over there, like an old building? It's kind of like that. I could only see his belly right here, shot him through the stomach. And he fell over, kind of watching him. You could start smelling him like a gut shot deer, where the wind was blowing. And my chief came over from the village where they were doing kind of their KLE, where they started out early morning, do the clearance, and they did a key leader engagement. He said, "Hey, man, good job. Remember to take care of it." So we go over, we clear up to him. Old boy sits up. He's got his, AK. He sits up like this right here, and the guy I was with, I'll try not to use last names at least, because I think he's still at development group right now. So maybe we should cut all that out altogether. But me and the guy I was with, he was going around him on the L, and the old dude sat up with his AK, and I remember throwing my carbine. We were running Scars at that time.
Really?
It's 7.62 Scars. That first run of test Scars, and they were phenomenal. I hated the ergonomics, but they ran great and they were super accurate. And I remember throwing that thing up and hitting him with that little red dot in that L-cam, boom, and his head looked like Gallagher popping a watermelon, Shot him from like about me to you.
Wow.
Where we cleared around to. And I was like, I mean, I was stoked, dude. This is what every team guy dreams of, right? Yeah. Sniper kills, close quarters, kills, and that happened a pretty good bit, especially early on in deployment.
Do you know about how many sniper engagements you had?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, if we count all the ones where you missed a guy or wounded a guy and somebody else shot him, I would even say, I mean, maybe hundreds.
Wow.
Like actually being able to shoot at guys. Who hit them, if we hit them, who knows. Actual legit sniper kills that I can count. They gave me an award that said for 21 sniper kills, right? But it might be other guys shooting them and moving too. But I would say like legit sniper kills.
A few dozen.
8, yeah, I would say 8, like legit. Like I put my crosshairs on them, squeezed the trigger, and watched them go down. 8 legit sniper kills. And then there was some where we shot them close. There was some where we were machine gunning dudes down on motorcycles, moving to mortar positions, and so they count that as an overall
KIA.
Yeah, for the task unit or the platoon or whatever, And I want to say. Somebody's going to hear this and they're going to be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but it was over 300 dudes that our task unit killed. So you got, roughly 35 SEALs. There's over 300 dudes we killed on that deployment between Alpha and Bravo platoon. Alpha platoon got more kills than we did because where they were at Fob Lane and the operations they did. But we had a lot of our kills just in fob defense.
Yeah.
One night I got on the Ma Deuce. It was one of the first base attacks we got, and I got on where my sniper tower was. We had a 50 BMG, I say sniper tower. There's 2 towers, and this was like a sandbag area. And we were just putting one level of sandbags up, and then that PKM was burning through the sandbags, and quickly we said, hey, we need 2 layers of sandbags, right? Because bullets are still coming through the sandbags. And they're shooting rockets and mortars at us, and I saw some dudes shooting in the field at about 50 to 100 yards. They're kind of standing up and shooting this little field near where we were. And I just took that Ma Deuce and, just did a Z pattern, through the field, and then a W pattern up and down. And we went out there and collected bodies, and we counted 5 dead in that field. Now, other guys were shooting in that field too. So those were a lot of the, maybe the kills, I guess.
I mean, shit, so on that deployment, that's a 10 to 1 ratio then.
Probably so. Stumpf could probably tell you better. He said, man, you got a terrible memory, because I said, yeah, we did a 6-month. He said it was a 10-month deployment. He was right, because we actually rolled over in February. Now, some of the guys rolled over earlier than the others. When I got in country, we're getting ready to go do DEA ops, and that's when Adam Brown was killed, and everything went River City, and that was like when I first got there. So that would have been beginning of March of, 2010.
Yeah.
So, and it was a big experience. Green Beret was, I'm trying to remember, we're the only guys in country that had dive gear and could dive. And I think that commonly happens overseas. It's really just your SEALs that can do that when you're in like Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever. And we got pulled on a mission to go find the body of a Green Beret who was shot and washed down river, and he was actually at the bottom of a dam. They wound up finding him before we got there. But I remember getting all of our stuff up and going up way up into a northern province somewhere. So we're still getting pulled to do things like that. And, even though we didn't necessarily get to, dive and find the body, where we were at, we were prepared. TF Red was there, I think, running some like security in the mountains. I mean, a lot of gunfights going on while we were trying to recover this body. We did get to do a lot of missions. I say a lot of missions. We were still pulled for missions like that, which was pretty cool.
Was that motorcycle sniper shot the most kind of dynamic sniper shot, or were there?
No, I mean, we shot a lot of guys off motorcycles. The furthest dude I killed was on a motorcycle. It was at that might have been the most dynamic one. That was at 2,345 yards.
No shit.
Yeah. So he started out. He came out of a village. So we were doing. This was a task unit size op. I remember that. And so we had Bravo and Alpha clearing these 2 separate villages, and they were basically pushing together and doing a key leader engagement so they could hopefully engage any of the squatters from the villages that were bad guys. Obviously looking for a couple specific people, but weapons and IED material. The reason we got put on this, Highway 1 that goes through Kalat right there. There was some HME and IED that I mean, it liquefied everybody in the truck. The truck actually survived the blast. I remember seeing the video of it, and it lifted it. It was one of them Buffalo trucks, right? You know what I'm talking? Remember the Buffalo trucks? I mean, it's like a big,
What was it? Army guys, Marine?
Army guys. Yeah, it was a convoy of Army guys, and like it was the overpressure that killed everybody in the truck because it didn't actually breach the hull. And this is just what I'm being told. And it was 1,000 pounds of HME, which is a lot of homemade explosive. And when they did that, they're like, "Hey, go get them, boys." So we got turned loose to go get them, and this was one of those ops in response to that. If memory serves right, it was in response to that very specific thing. And so we're clearing, and they're looking for all this. Had the dog guys there, running the dogs, which you're very familiar with. And those dogs would find stuff that was buried like 6 foot deep, just all kinds of stuff. So we're doing that, and then obviously killing Taliban fighters in the area. And man, we were getting nothing in our hide sight. And it's first thing in the morning. We hear shots going on in the town, and it was like, God, man, we should be on the dang clearance. This sucks. Just sitting there with a sniper gun, don't see anything, just watching, and everybody's getting into fights or just killing some bad guys. They engaged some trucks. They were engaging them. So there's a lot of stuff happening. And these dudes kind of come out the back end of the village, and there are two dudes on a motorcycle with their one of them had a PKM, the 7.62 by 54 round, the machine gun, the belt fed that they ran. And the other had one of those AKs, with the long bipods. And he was one of we always called him the red-bearded wizards, right? He had this big beard and had all the red dye in it because he made the trip to Mecca or whatever it was. And I remember him specifically, him coming out. Bro, they were like 800 meters just down below. It was a super high-angle shot. Kale was on a 300 Win Mag, and he called me and said, hey, bro, we got guys on a motorcycle, and they kind of started rolling that way. And he said, let's get down here and try to do some command fire. I remember telling him, hey, dude, start dumping rounds at 300 Win Mag right now while they're at 1,000. And when you run out, because we had to move our hide sight, you had whatever's in your magazine. When you run out, if you don't hit them, I'll start sending it because I had that McMillan TAC 50. I love that gun, man. That thing, 660 grain Rothfuss round just blowing up every time it hits.
Dude, 660 grain.
660 grains. I tell you, the ones that shoot better is the 750 grain solids. We shoot those out of 50 BMG now. They're phenomenal. But had comp B in the tip, so they kind of blew up when it hit, and you could see it at distance and know what adjustment you need to make. So anyway, he shoots, and he misses those 5 shots he had, and they're kind of zipping around on the motorcycle. And I remember Cease is out now, so I can say his name, but Cease was with me, and he starts lasing it. And I remember the first one was 1,710 yards. He had that, remember the big rangefinders? We had the Viper, the humongous, they'd lays out at like 6,000 yards or something. 1,710, shoot. And I could see the trace on this. I could see the trace in my scope, which, I can still do that now, even so, but it's harder depending on where you're at. I just remember seeing the trace, and I remember watching it go over, boom, and blow up, and so I'm making they're doing the thing, and I got to that 5th one. There's 2 guys on the bike. I remember the one guy jumping off and running into the hills. I didn't track with him. I was just like, I'm gonna stay with the guy on the bike. He slow turned this roll, and he was rolling around the side of a hill, and Cease says 2345, bro. If you're gonna send it now, because he was kind of gonna disappear. I racked my bolt, I cranked my dope all the way out, and I needed 2 more mils to hold. So I remember holding on that second mil dot and putting the wind hold that I thought on. The dude was in the bottom corner of my scope, and I remember closing my eyes. Natural point of aim was good. This dude was slow rolling, and I just said, please, Lord, let it hit. I remember watching that trace, and it went over the hill, and it blew up, and the bike fell over. And I was like, daggone, man. I said, I think I missed. And about a minute later, our TU commander called. Scott said, hey, Hud, how far was that guy that you just shot at? And I said, about 2 clicks. And he said, that's a long shot, son. He's laying over there calling for a doctor and a mechanic. So what had happened, and they cleared to him and saw what had happened is the bullet went through the bike, and it went through the guy's leg. More so up, and it might have went through both of his legs actually, and through the bike. But either way, it went through his hips. But he lay there and bled out. He said the guys on ICOM are like saying he goes with God, but it went through him, and that was a long story, just to tell you that was my longest kill, and that dude was on a motorcycle too, doing about 3 miles an hour that way. So You know.
Okay, so that was the 660 grain.
Yeah, that was a Rothfuss round. So it blew up it went through his legs and the bike, and then it blew up on the ground on the other side. That's why I thought I missed, because I thought it would blow up on that. But as we shot more people with it, we realized, or shot more, let's say bikes or whatever, we realized it would, because I shot a dude with that same gun on a base attack right at 1 mile. He's at just inside a mile, my 1,500 meter target. And it went through his chest and it blew up behind him. And so we started realizing it needs hard. It's armor piercing. It needs a hard, almost like a piece of armor to initiate that. Flesh and soft material like a regular car or something, it doesn't make that comp B that's in the tip, and that, I guess, depleted uranium is what I was told in the tip, is what doesn't make it go off. It has to hit, so it only go off on the ground.
I mean, what kind of kinetic energy is getting dumped into a guy with that amount of grain?
That's a great question, man.
I mean, I know there's a formula, but
so the 50 BMG, think of it this way. I mean, you're only running 660 grain bullet. Let's say you're running 2,600 feet per second at the muzzle. The difference in it, is that the atmospherics don't affect it as much. So I might be running 2,600 feet per second at the muzzle, but because of what it holds on to, I'm still running 2,000 feet per second, let's say at 1,000 yards. And I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. It maintains its speed and even its ballistic coefficient. It's just so big that the atmospherics around it don't affect it as much. So even though it's going slower at the front end, it's able to hold on to it longer. That's why shooting heavier grain rounds oftentimes are a little bit better. Now, the one thing with that is, it's just a 30-06 on steroids. A 30-06 has been a great round for, 150 years now, maybe not 100, 120 years now. And that's what the 50 BMG is. It works. I want to say its ballistic coefficient is 1, which is what you want, I could be wrong. Some long-range shooter on here is going to get mad at me, It's like
somebody will get mad at you.
Yeah, somebody's going to get mad no matter what. But I want to say the ballistic coefficient is 1. We can look it up maybe when we go on break or whatever and see what energy is. But it is a ton of energy that's going through whatever you shoot. Now, I have heard if it passes within so far of you, it kills you. I've shot at a lot of guys and missed a lot of guys. It was like really close. And I actually had a GM when I was he was supposed to clear a safe of my deuce when I was going to take the barrel off and time it. You pull that little nipple into place, right there in the hole, and you kind of time your barrel to check your headspace of timing on the my deuce. And he got fired and kicked out of NSW, but he cranked one off, and that muzzle was right here by my face. It burned my eyebrows, singed my beard, knocked me off the truck. Like a big flashbang going off, blew my ears. I had was it like a level 2 squeeze? Doc King looked at me as a level 2 squeeze in my ears. It was no joke.
Yeah.
And that was literally at the muzzle, like right here at my face, and it didn't kill me. So I don't believe that. I think a lot of guys are talking about, nah, man, it's just not like that. It's got to hit you to kill you. But generally speaking, when it hits you, wherever it hits you, you're probably going to die. Yeah, you're probably going to die.
Is there a discernible difference from a target damage standpoint between the 660 and the 750? Like, would you?
No, but so the 750 I only started shooting after I got out of the teams and just did long range stuff. It does a whole lot better with grouping, and it has that because it's a little bit heavier and you're running at about the same speed. Its terminal ballistics down range are a little bit better, but there's not a discernible difference there. The biggest discernible difference in, like, say, that 750, when it hits, I've still got to look for a dust splash versus that 660 grain or, whatever it is, Rothfuss round with comp B in the tip. The reason we shot those,
it's almost like a tracer.
Well, you can see it's not necessarily a tracer in the sky, but it's a tracer by when I see the impact.
Effectively it is, in that
it is because you know exactly where you're hitting. That's right. So I don't have to trust my trace. I see the impact, it explodes. I know that I hit in my scope, let's say 2 mils left or 2 mils low or whatever it is. I can more easily see that impact than just a dust cloud hitting.
Can you describe what the damage that a 50 cal sniper round does to a human body when it's shot center mass?
Well, without putting pictures and stuff up. We'd have to take pictures of combatants and stuff we shoot. I mean, it is substantial. I mean, I can't explain it. Like, it definitely destroys the body. Whereas your 300 Win Mag, does a good job. It might punch a hole and then leave a nice exit wound, and some of the overpressure sucks lungs and stuff out of the back. This thing just blows. I mean, it impacts with so much. It tears the flesh, blows the bones out. There was a lady, those guys I was talking about that were shooting with the Ma-Deuce, the machine gun, right down in the field on the base. There was a lady out there. We saw her on thermal that night out there picking up the body parts and chunks. There was people want to see it. There's a movie, Rambo 5, where he's up there shooting that machine gun. I would say that's a pretty accurate depiction of what that round does. Yeah. But it does have to hit you. That's the biggest thing I want to say, is all the guys are like, if it goes by you, it's going to kill you. No, that round has to hit you to kill you, as pretty much probably any round, any shoulder-fired round for that matter.
I mean, I imagine that the motorcycle shot that went through both of his legs, that would almost guarantee femoral artery severance.
Oh, yeah,
right?
dude. Well, I mean, it like blasted them. It looked like a shark attack or something, like just whole chunks of meat off of his leg, broke the bones, So, I mean, it was absolutely devastating where it went through at. It didn't just go through one leg. But this was, I remember the way it went through, the least amount of damage was on the front leg, and the most amount of damage was on the back leg. And I think that's because it went through the bike, and the bike actually tore a bunch of stuff out.
So that first phase of that Afghanistan deployment, super busy, lots of sniper action. The next phases, do any operations stand out as being memorable?
It was not as much, because it wasn't just full tilt combat. We got pulled, and I can't talk much about it because I think the NDA is still active for this operation. But it was, I won't say the name of the operation, but we were working with SDV and working a sniper overwatch for SDV, and engaging little pirate dinghies that were getting close to the SDV. So it was almost like we were a deterrent, and we're just flying around a helo. We do a half and a half. We had to, go take down a ship. There were some British contractors on the ship because the ship ran into an American vessel. That was a big deal. That would have been the one, but probably what stood out the most is the Iranians were out there, and they had Dishkas and their RPGs and stuff on their boats. And it's like, here I am flying around in this helo in the, over the water. I won't tell exactly where we are, but flying around this helo over the water, and these Iranians are out there in their boats with all their stuff pointed at us. And our rules of engagement were essentially, don't fire unless fired upon, or don't fire unless they, impact the where the SDV was. And so that was, even though all the combat in Afghanistan and everything, that was probably the hairiest situation that we had ever been in, because these dudes decided to light up the helo with a Dishka. We're going down. I mean, I might shoot the dude who's hammering at me with a Dishka, but the problem is I'm in a helo over the water, and this guy's in a boat with a Dishka, and his buddies have RPGs, and we're just kind of flying around pointing guns, and they're driving around pointing guns at each other. It was very...
Yeah, I mean, ROE is like they're basically telling you to do the Braveheart hold.
That's it. Yeah.
Which to me seems a bit counterintuitive. What year was that? That was
2012 maybe.
I mean, I guess from an Iranian opposition standpoint, was that the only time you guys encountered for sure Iranian forces?
For me, yes. For other guys, no. The SDV guys encountered them more so than we did.
Yeah.
But for me, yes.
Yeah.
Others, it wasn't long after that those U.S. sailors got because I think I was going through the med board process, all of that stuff. So I was in that process. So I really wasn't out yet, I guess, but I was essentially out. I was back home in Alabama doing all the crap you got to do. And I think that's when those sailors were abducted by the Iranians. That was not too long after that deployment. I want to say probably about a year after that.
Yeah. So for the rest of that deployment, just kind of bounced around doing a lot of different stuff.
Worked with the Marshals, West Coast Fugitive Task Force. There was some paperwork that had to be signed. Worked with L.A. Sheriff's Office during that time. I was at Team 3, obviously. Got to do a lot of work with them.
Doing what?
I can't remember what the program was called, but like we went out and served warrants with them.
In the United States?
In the United States, yeah.
As an active team guy?
As an active team guy, yeah. We were working very closely with them. And that's what kind of got me into law enforcement. And the U.S. Marshal Service, I'd already had a relationship with them. They were using our kill houses. There was some sort of training nexus, it was like a rut, but it wasn't called a rut. And then we were allowed to go out and do ride-alongs with these guys, go, serve warrants and do stuff like that. So that was a whole partnership at a higher level than me. I just know that is what we were required to do, and it did get me into kind of the law enforcement world. I had buddies back home that were law enforcement that I did ride-alongs with. When I'd go home on leave, I'd just ride around with them. And so I was already interested in that. And then obviously with what happened to me, medically, the type 1 diabetes aspect, them going through all the stuff and, the back and forth, SOCOM Care Coalition stepping in, assigning me an attorney, and all of that taking place, that's what opened the doors for me to basically say, hey, you know what, I think I'm going to try. Yeah, I'm going to try law enforcement. So
I guess before we get into that next phase, I'm still curious. I've never heard about active special operations being used in the United States. I mean, Zach, maybe you can look up. I know that there's a specific statute that legally says that U.S. military is not supposed to be used.
There was some paperwork. So from my understanding, I think CAG probably does it more than anybody. They'll work with the feds, and now they're signing off on some stuff for U.S. military to work stateside against the cartels and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the paperwork they did for us. I don't know how they did it, but we were doing that training with them, and then they allowed us, and the command allowed us to go on ride-alongs or warrant service, just to work with that. Those groups in LA County Sheriff's Office.
From their perspective, is involving you guys a numbers thing, a skill set thing, both?
It was kind of, to be honest with you, it was kind of a recruitment thing for them.
Really?
Because they tried hard. They're like, hey, dude, if you're looking to get out, come up here. And I want to go back home to Alabama if I got out, right? They're like, come up here to us, man, in LA County. Which they would recruit. There was a handful of team guys that worked for LA County at the time.
Oh, wow.
But I think it was a recruitment thing for them. They were setting up training. We were doing training with them, and then it was approved at whatever level for us to go and actually work as law enforcement officers. Not us work as law enforcement officers, but work with the law enforcement officer, like a ride along or a warrant service process. And we got to do a lot, and that's where, the handful of guys were like, dude, this is what we need to be doing.
And this is during, year-wise, during the Obama administration?
Yeah, it was like 2012, 2013 time frame. Yeah.
I think that would surprise a lot of people that if we can mention it.
How much of it we were supposed to do? That's a great question, because it wasn't approved at my level. They're just like, hey, do y'all want to do this? I'm like, yes, I absolutely want to do that.
That's a fucking trip.
Yeah. So that's what got me into law enforcement, though, is working with those guys and seeing what they were doing. I was like, this could be a fun gig.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I guess before we get into that, just the third deployment, I know you did a lot of different things, and you're in like 9 different countries. If you could just kind of highlight the chronological timeline of that quick before we get into that.
Yeah, so we were slated. So the timeline of that deployment, we were slated for Iraq. I'm trying to remember because so much stuff happened. We left to actually go to Iraq, and then Iraq shut down. And we might have even went into Tikrit during that time. But I can't remember if I was in Tikrit then or if it was the time beforehand. It doesn't matter. It was so quick. We flew in, and they're like, hey, this is over. It's done. Team 1 finished up the Iraq thing, and we went over to do a JSET in Jordan. There was a lot of stuff that happened in Jordan. The Jordanians, and we were with them. They did like a live ship takedown in the Red Sea, their Tier 1 unit that was there. And so we were with them on that. We're kind of like combat advisors on the JSET. We did clearances and all that stuff. So that was cool being able to do. They did a live ship takedown. Then we did some training ship takedowns in the Red Sea, hook and climbs with them. That's just cool to be able to say you did it in the Red Sea, in my opinion. These like cruise liner type ships. But met King Abdullah during that time, right? Yeah. He came and met us. They stamped our passport, shook our hand. at the airport. That was pretty neat, and got to go to Petra, and it was, you know, a good JSET with a lot of stuff happening in that area at the time, which made it even cooler, but also got to see a lot of cool places that, you know, I wouldn't have got to see otherwise.
Yeah.
So that deployment, so then came back, and around that time is when we had all that stuff with L.A. County. We did the training with them, the RUT or whatever, you know,
Which is realistic urban training.
That's right. They set that up for us, so doing that, and then getting to do the ride-alongs and stuff with them to really learn about law enforcement. Setting up the training for the Marshal Service at that time and getting involved with the Marshal Service and seeing, you know, what they do for the West Coast Fugitive Task Force. And then we went right back out to South Korea. That's when those missiles launched. The coolest training thing I think I ever did, I had the most fun in sniper school, but it was a train-a-knot. We did a half bath on a boat in South Korea, and it was snowing. And I was a Hearst cast master, and I remember looking out and seeing the snow. And here I am, you know, whatever, at the time, 26-year-old, 27-year-old teen guy. I guess I've been 26 at the time, looking out the door, and snow blowing in. It's cold. It's like, this is what it's all about. No, we're not. It's just a training thing right here in Korea with the Rock SEALs. But man, if there's really dudes on this boat to shoot, this is what being in the SEAL teams is about. You know, so did the Hearst cast stuff there, and on this slick deck in the snow. This thing is underway out in the Yellow Sea, I think. So doing that stuff with those guys, and then being able to, you know, work with them as, you know, with the diving for the missile situation, all that stuff, and they found it. That's when North Korea shot all those into the Yellow Sea.
What was the water temp like when you were diving?
Oh, dude, it was flipping cold. Yeah, I mean,
like,
it was. I say cold. I mean, it probably was in the 40s.
Yeah.
You know,
Were you guys wetsuit?
50. Oh yeah, we were wet. Yeah, we were wetsuits. It was cold, dude. And those Rock SEAls.
Yeah, they're hard as wood.
Oh my gosh, dude, those dudes are the hardest dudes you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
Those dudes did not give a what. They're just tough dudes. So did that, and it was real cool working with them because of who they were, and love Korean food. I say love Korean food. I love Korean barbecue. I like the pork, the stuff. I don't like all the other squid and all that stuff they eat, but I like the cooking in front of you stuff. So we, you know, did that, and then came back, and I want to say we went to all of the platoon checked into Yemen at that time, flew in, did that whole thing, and then part of us broke out and left and came back stateside and did more stuff on the line with the law enforcement piece, and did me and one other guy, we did a sniper JSET back to Korea. So went back to Korea for a month, worked with their snipers, did all that stuff, and we did some more diving then. And actually, as a matter of fact, that might have been all the diving we did. It might have been in April. It wasn't when it was snowing. It was during that sniper JSET, if I remember right. But that was really cool to do because I am the lead E6, or I was the chief or the OIC of the trip. So that was cool to see, to have that leadership placed on me as a young team guy. The guy under me, he might have retired out now. He's now a master chief. He was a new guy in the platoon, but I won't say his name. But man, just a solid guy. Still talk to him pretty regularly, and he did a great job on that sniper training trip. So we're there for about a month, came back, and then we went to Bahrain and worked the Cree mission, I guess is what it would have been called, and that's when we got pulled to do all that stuff I talked about with it, where we ran into Iran, is the stuff with SDV that would have been the vast majority of the rest of that deployment.
Yeah. And no actual shots fired with mixing it up with the Iranian, just super close calls.
No shots fired at all. Now we shot at the pirate dinghies and stuff like that. You know, we shot at those, but no, as far as like legit stuff, or when that boat hit the American ship, this big tanker ship, and there was like British contractors on the boat. We did a half and a bath over to them. No shots fired there. You know, thank the Lord. But you know, we had some serious stuff going on that, where it's like, thinking about it now, I was like, man, at the time I didn't realize how flipping dicey this was. Yeah.
When you guys were engaging the pirate vessels, were you like warning shots, or were you guys dumping?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, most of them would jump out, and then we might, you know, sink the vessel or something like that, but nothing crazy. You know, if you just, again, we were a deterrent for the SDV, because the SDV that was our ROE. You know, these guys can't negatively impact the SEAL delivery vehicle.
And I'm assuming during that same time, part of the catalyst for you separating from the military was type 1 diabetes being something that you were diagnosed with that was derived from the anthrax vaccine.
That's what they said after they did a study. So for me, here I'm looking at, I've got right at 6 years in the SEAL team. So a normal contract, done a few deployments, got some combat, which was good, got some experience to the stuff that a team guy wants to experience. So I screened for Green Team. My chief, I don't think he would care. Mike Birkenbach was my chief at the time. He's out now, went to his retirement. Probably one of the best operators I ever met. Burke said, "Hey, y'all need to screen." He came from development group, so he said, "Y'all need to screen me and a handful of guys." I remember using his fins for the swim. He gave me a set of fins to use for the swim, and screened positive in that regard. And then he told me, he said, "Look, if you're going to get out, you need to get out because you're going to take a Green Team slot." And so I said, went over and talked to what's his name? Doesn't matter. Went over and talked to the reserve unit, say, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting out and going back to Alabama and staying with the reserve unit. What are your thoughts?" Now, by this time, I'm slated for sniper school, so now I'm out from under Team 3, and I'm with, I guess, Advanced Training Command. And
like to go be an instructor for sniper
school. Yeah, I'd be an instructor for sniper school. And they said, "Yeah, man, we'd love to have you. We can do this." And so I'm looking at that. I had to go to medical to do like a medical assessment, all the normal stuff, and that's where they found that I had type 1 diabetes. The doctor specifically said there's no way that you have diabetes. I mean, I just screened positive for Green Team, passed the physical, all that. There's no way you have diabetes. I remember him saying that. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, I don't have diabetes." And so I had to do a weekend fast and come back and do a blood sugar check. So they did it like 3 times just to see, and finally got a good blood sugar check. And as I decided, I said, "Hey, you know what? I think I'm going to get out, and then I'll come back in active duty when my wife finishes nursing school back home." That's when the world, almost, I say, fell apart. Didn't really fall apart, but that's a total shift, because it was like my body full on got hit with type 1 diabetes. I lost 26 pounds in about a week. Wow. And when all that happened, I had to go through the process. And then I spent about a year. I was 20, I'm trying to think. It had been 2013, so 2014 is when I finally got all my final paperwork. So about a year, maybe a little bit longer, going through that process with the VA, with the Navy, with all of the stuff. And I can't complain. It worked out completely. I got retirement IDs. I got health care for my family. At the time, it was just my wife. We had our first kid in 2015. I got all of that stuff that I needed for that. I got 100% with the VA, and all that process worked together, and that is actually what helped me. And it took a little bit. SOCOM Care Coalition assigned me an attorney, but that process helped me more easily transition into what I do now, where I didn't have to work as a full-time law enforcement officer. I could start my business and then ultimately start a nonprofit, and that's where we're at now.
Where does the link exist or come from as it correlates to the anthrax vaccine cost?
Man, I don't know. That's a great question, because some doctors will say that I met with in this process say it's not 100% the anthrax vaccine, and then some are like it is 100% the anthrax vaccine. However, I am predisposed to type 1 diabetes because that does run in my family. So if my brother gets the anthrax vaccine, he stands a chance of getting type 1 diabetes, versus, let's say, for you, if your family, if it's not a family history, you don't necessarily stand a chance of getting type 1 diabetes. However, it seemed, and that was one thing I noticed when I went to the SOCOM Care Coalition. There's some guys from CAG that were there. They're more senior. There were guys from Ranger Bat was there. There was a couple other SEALs that were there. Not all of them had the exact same thing going on, but all of them had similar autoimmune issues. I remember, like an autoimmune disease that didn't allow them to continue to be an operator, because diabetes is an autoimmune disease. It didn't allow them to continue to be an operator, but was working on getting them medically retired out. The problem is a lot of these autoimmune diseases, you could still be in the conventional military. So that was where I was like, I don't want to do that. And they're like, well, you go to sniper school and be a sniper school instructor. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Do this for the next 12 years? By the time all this was done, I'd had 8 years, with your military time, and make chief and retire out as a chief. Are y'all still going to give me my special pays that you need? They're like, oh yeah, that'll be there. And I'm like, you're telling me I can't jump and I can't dive because I'm insulin dependent. They don't generally give jump and dive pay unless you're jumping and diving.
Yeah.
And then do I still get my SEAL pay, that extra pay you get just for being a SEAL, if I'm not jumping and diving? So, I decided to just go ahead and transition out and take what they offered.
Yeah. As you go through the health and medical issues with type 1 diabetes and end up separating out and going not necessarily right into law enforcement, but kind of a combination of law enforcement and starting your own company. Walk us through what that was like and the struggles ultimately getting you to where you are now, where the human trafficking stuff that you're doing is fascinating as well as a lot of the law enforcement stuff.
Yeah. So like we talked about earlier, my exposure to law enforcement was what we had done during that time, during 2012, 2013, at SEAL Team 3 with, and I texted, buddy, the SEB unit up there, the Special Enforcement Bureau. That's basically their SWAT. So that exposure to that training and kind of learning what they do, seeing what they do, I was like, hey man, this could be like stateside SEAL team stuff, right? You're actively out doing a lot of good work for the community around. So that was kind of where my mind was. Working with the Marshal Service, also the kill house down there. It's gone now because they rebuilt all the command. I don't know if you've been over and seen it on the West Coast. It's phenomenal, man. It's a great. The way all the SEAL teams are laid out, it's really cool. The only thing that sucks about it is Warcom is right there in the middle of them all. So you got to deal with Warcom as you're working out or whatever. A bunch of the guys in a leadership position that want to bark at everybody for not having a proper shave or not wearing the right uniform or something. But other than that, it's beautiful. They did a great job where the elephant cages used to be. Building that up. But before that was there was that old kill house that was down there. And the West Coast Fugitive Task Force loved using that, and obviously working with them some in that training. And me being where I was at Team 3, I was a point of contact. And I would set it up, and we would go down there and work with those guys as they were prepping for very specific warrants, more so the Marshals Task Force. We would set it up so they could do hits on that. And just seeing all of that got me tied into some law enforcement individuals back home. And these guys, basically, when I got out, they said, hey, if you can hire this guy, you need to hire him. And it got me hired in the law enforcement world relatively quickly, even though I was going through a medical process at the time. So when that was, the wheels of justice, for lack of a better word, were turning, because it would take like 6 months to a year to get hired. It took about 2 months for me, with all the different connections I'd made, calling back to specific counties in Alabama. But as that process was working, I started a company, called it the Shooting Institute, and had another buddy who was a retired cop that I'd met when I was in sniper school out of Trafficking, Indiana. Remember, sniper school's done at Atterbury up there. So I met them up there and have been friends ever since. We go up and hunt with him every year. And he's like, hey, man, I got all these women asking for these like women's pistol courses, or these guys wanting a pistol course. You get out, you want to try to come up and train them. And so I was like, yeah, I started looking into it, and decided to start the Shooting Institute. Literally just to start it for random civilian courses. Women, never thought anything would be of it other than good extra money. So started doing that, get hired in law enforcement, and it's just kind of happening where I'm teaching and I'm working as a patrol deputy. I went through the academy and all that stuff, and still working out my med retirement stuff, by the way, or my pseudo med retirement with what they wound up offering me and accepting. And that didn't come till 2014. But so I had all of that going on at the same time. We didn't have any kids at the time, me and my wife, and got pregnant with our first. And she had a miscarriage, and then not long after that got pregnant with our second. So a lot of things happening and transitioning there. And the Lord just opened the doors for, with me going into law enforcement, I started then taking the training company and doing training for law enforcement, to the point that we started running SWAT schools, and we developed the SWAT curriculum for the state of Alabama, which is called the Basic Tactical Officer Certification. We did that, and I was shooting a lot more during that time of my life. Got shot a few matches, won some stuff, and got picked up for a couple other companies. A guy from Development Group that I knew from Team 3, I won't say his name on here, but he started a company, and he hired me in to teach for him. He had Rodney May teaching for him. And I don't know if y'all remember Rodney from Mid-South, from Shaw's. Yeah, so Rodney was teaching for him. I got to learn a lot from Rodney. Then we started going around and shooting matches for him. And then he got my company into, he's like, hey, you can bid these contracts. He was working at a place. His company wound up tanking and shutting down. So we did a lot of stuff for law enforcement to that, but you can bid contracts to the federal government. So I started bidding those. I got one for Air Force Security Forces, and that's what got me in as a prime with the government. And then they had one where there was a prime, but it was for JSOC. It was for the enablers for JSOC. They would support, I say JSOC, they would support CAG and then just all of the SEAL teams. Those were the two units they supported. So, and that unit's name was JCSE. And I wound up winning the sub portion to teach all the firearms in CQB for JCSE. Wow. And placed as director over that training. So just very quickly, in a short amount of time, those doors opened up. The other thing I started doing that we haven't even talked about at all is, and I still teach for this and train for it, a buddy of mine from the SEAL teams, we went through training together. He's still in. He was enlisted, and then he went O, as most team guys have a degree or get a degree at some point in time. Well, he had one, and then he went O. And after he went O, he went over and screened and he wound up being a TU commander at Blue Squadron for a little while. And then he came back and did his XO, and I think he just finished his CO tour, if I remember right. But good friend of mine, and his father-in-law ran a company called White Buffalo out of Moodus, Connecticut. And this dude is Tony, the guy that's his father-in-law, is a PhD from, I think he's Yale, if I remember right. He was a Yale PhD, but he's a wildlife biologist. And we were culling deer, culling pigs, darting the animals in New York and like the Hamptons and New York City, and they're doing surgeries on them. And I was a big hunter, big in the woods, and all that. Had a young kid at the time, so I was okay with still being gone, needed to make money, building a training company. I left full-time law enforcement to go work for him because he paid a lot better, kept my credentials active, still doing all the training stuff, but my full-time job became actually culling animals, deer, pig, all over Guam, northern, the United States, and New York. And that was actually a really cool gig, and I was looking, had a business degree at the time. I was looking to do a few classes and then get my master's in wildlife biology. But at the onset of my wife getting pregnant with our second child and me seeing how much, and then our, youngest being, a couple years old at the time, me seeing how long I was being gone doing the wildlife work, I was like, I just swapped deployments overseas for freaking deer deployment stateside, and that's what transitioned me out of that, is the family life. And then when I transitioned out of that, I hit the training stuff hard. As we hit the training stuff hard, that's where the Lord opened the doors for the anti-human trafficking stuff that I was already kind of working, maintaining my credentials as a law enforcement officer.
How did that actually come to fruition from it being presented to you?
So I was doing the wildlife work and running the training company. That would be my full-time gig. I worked as a part-time SWAT and vice narcotics deputy for Jefferson County Sheriff's Office in Alabama, and did a lot of training for them, served warrants with it, kept my credentials active so I could still be a post-certified officer. It's not like, you got a lot of team guys that'll just get sworn in and they got a badge. No, I'm a post-certified officer in the state of Alabama. So you have to do things to maintain the credentials. So I'm doing that, shooting matches when I can, which really dwindled as I started to have kids, running the training company and doing the wildlife stuff. And that's what I was that's the circle that I was in. During that process, and I can't remember how exactly it happened, but I got called and asked to help with some kind of anti-human trafficking sting, and got involved in that. And from that point on, that's what kind of carried me down the human trafficking road.
And so with that, was the introduction to that as eye-opening as I would assume that it is, or was it more of a slow roll?
No, it was very eye-opening, but it was eye-opening to two sides. Me and another buddy of mine, who's our executive director for Covenant Rescue Group for a while, he's retired now, or he's still working as a law enforcement officer, but his name's Mike Rebels, one of the best cops, one of the best dudes I've ever had the privilege of meeting or working with. He was in the Army for a little while, but he's been a cop for almost 30 years. He was on the plank owner of the U.S. Marshals Task Force, the Gulf Coast Regional Task Force in the Southeast. Just a solid dude. Me and him actually came out here to Texas for an organization. I can't remember the name of the organization, but they don't exist anymore. It's being run by a retired FBI agent. And one of the things we saw was like, and this ain't human trafficking. This is symbolism without substance. Like we appreciate the heart, and there's a lot of good stuff that it seemed like they're trying to do. But we felt like, we're like, dude, this is a flipping waste of time. And so that was my first experience. We're saying, like, I know this is real. Then my next experience was with Operation Underground Railroad, that Sound of Freedom movie. Tim Ballard became a pretty good friend, I guess, over the years. I haven't talked to him in a little while, but we did some work with him in Haiti, and I was like, okay, they're actually doing some work. It seemed like, although it still was like, how do we do this work stateside? So that's what was the catalyst to me as a law enforcement agent. Finished my master's in business during this time, because you can do everything online now. So I finished my master's in business and met with some people that I knew, the CPA, a handful of different folks, and my wife and I said, hey, we want to start our own nonprofit that is going to, we'll focus on human trafficking wherever, but it's going to really focus on human trafficking so it's impactful, because so many organizations, I'll be honest with you, it's not impactful. And spent a lot of time praying over it. Obviously, I talked about my faith, and you heard that. It was just really the Lord opened the doors. We had some money. We started it, brought a team together, put a board together. And 2018, we started Covenant Rescue Group. 2019, we got our 501c3 status, or whatever it's called, whenever the IRS says, yeah, you're a legit nonprofit. Yeah, certification. Yeah. So,
what is it that you guys do, and how do you go about it?
So, we started with some overseas stuff. The problem with overseas stuff is you've got to deal with another country, and a lot of people think, hey, we just go over here and mess around. Well, no, they still have laws in those countries, and so we did a lot of work with a bunch of different organizations overseas. But when COVID happened, it limited our travel. And then also funds limited our travel. We were a hand-to-mouth organization, just doing operations as funds would come in. And when that happened, we're like, hey, let's try this stateside. So we took, I guess the concept would be to catch a predator, the Chris Hansen thing. The problem with the Chris Hansen thing, and what you see a lot of guys doing on Facebook and all that, catching guys trying to buy little girls, is most of what they do is not prosecutable. There's an entrapment issue that exists that's, again, these guys are protected by the U.S. Constitution. Not some bullcrap red tape that a law enforcement agency has. Like, literally our Bill of Rights is what's being violated most of the time with these organizations that go after guys stateside. I'm not saying that that's okay, that you shouldn't go after them, but you have to, if you're going to be a professional, then be a professional. Do it the appropriate way so we can deal with that. And why that's important, the American Psychiatric Association and the DOJ have did a study about 11 years ago, and for every man showing up for a little girl, there's 50 victims in his wake. For every man showing up for a little boy, there's 150 victims in his wake, until they're prosecuted. Not until they're arrested. That's the biggest thing. An arrest is easy to make. It's until they're prosecuted. And most of these cases that were being built were not prosecutable cases because of entrapment, because of lack of sufficient evidence, for the prosecutor's office. Just all of them would be a null pros, or maybe not all of them, a vast majority. So that's really what we started to focus on is, okay, how do we teach a law enforcement agency to make a successful arrest, build a successful felony case at the local level, and then that successful felony case actually be prosecutable? So that was around 2019, 2020 we started working on that. So we took that concept and how do we make it prosecutable? This is what it's I'm sorry, go back to you. You asked a question, and I'm not sure I actually answered.
Well, just like what you guys do.
Okay,
kind of
all
the
right.
main mission and how you do it.
So the main mission is to build prosecutable cases with local law enforcement. Before I get to how we do it, the reason that's important is it's I believe it's Thomas Blackwell, and it goes. I think Thomas Blackwell is his name, or I'm sorry, not Blackwell, Blackstone, and then Thomas Jefferson used a lot of what Blackstone said. It might not have been Thomas's first name. It doesn't matter. You can look it up, but basically they say the closest form of government to the people is the most effective form of government. So when we look at it, the feds, hey, what are we going to do with the federal human trafficking task force? The state human trafficking task force needs to do this. And you're already well beyond where you need to be because it's such a macro level. It's 30,000-foot view. We need to get at the 10-foot view so we can be more effective with what we're doing. And so that was the first thing is how do we get with local agencies and train them? I saw that as a local law enforcement officer, as a sheriff's deputy or a state law enforcement officer when I was sworn with the state for a little bit. And so as we look at that, how can we make these guys most effective? Because they're the guys on the ground every day dealing with it. They're the guys going to be making the arrest and making the cases, handing it over to that local prosecutorial jurisdiction so that they can successfully prosecute the cases. So that was originally the goal. Well, what we found out was whenever you make an arrest of a dude, let's say he's showing up by a 13-year-old girl, you actually find other victims in their wake, which is really important because now when you find those other victims, we already have an operation, decoy-based operation. He thinks he's buying a 14-year-old. He shows up, he's arrested. But nobody has to go on the stand and testify against this guy. Our Constitution requires that. Nobody has to testify against this guy. One thing that we were finding, when you find a guy who's actually selling people, the people he was selling or abusing or whatever, and I say he loosely, sometimes we find she's, but the majority is a male demographic. You have to have these victims go on the stand and testify. Well, I'll be honest with you. Most of the time, I can tell you every time I've seen it, and this isn't every time, some people do testify, but most of the time, these people that have been abused or been put through the stuff they've been through, they don't want to go on the stand and testify. They're already scared to death. So now you don't have a case. So we figured out a way to make these cases and find victims without ever having to put the victim on the X where they have to testify.
Can you explain how you do that, or is that
compromising? Yeah, so it's a decoy-based operation where, let's say we're working, say we're working in a local jurisdiction. We have decoys that appear to be underage, they're not, and these individuals will reach out to them. I won't go through the specifics of how we get them, but they reach out. That's the first thing. They have to reach out to us because that totally mitigates any entrapment issues because they initially reach out. The next thing we do is we make sure that they understand the age. Hey, I'm 14 years old if it's a girl chat. Or if I'm a dad selling my kids, hey, my daughter's 11 and 13. You want to buy two girls or 11 and 13? That's one I remember specifically doing.
That's a common thing, like parents doing that?
Oh, yeah, parents selling kids. Most of the time it's a female selling, but yes, it's common, which I'll get into a statistic in a minute that will maybe, kind of bring that home. And I've seen it to be true in what we've done. But we'll set up a decoy operation so that's really not an underage person. They think they're purchasing an underage person. Okay. So we infiltrate the consumer. When they show up, now we have probable cause and most everything is on the phone, to rip their phone. And we have probable cause to rip their phone. When we rip it, guess what? We find all the other victims in their wake because most of what we do is on our phone now.
Yeah.
So it's been the easiest way to build a case against this individual without having to have a victim testify, but also being able to find victims, either that they're having messages with or that they have pictures of. And I'll give a real-world example in a minute because that case has met its disposition. I'll try to we can't talk about any active cases. But that's how we find them. So long story short, guy shows up, arrest him on a local operation, solicitation of a minor, traveling to meet a minor for sex, or solicitation of a minor with electronic device, traveling to meet a minor for sex. These are felonies in almost every state with the exception of two, I think.
Which two, do you know?
I think it's Washington and Hawaii were the two that I remember doing. And they might have changed now because in Washington, when we're looking at Washington State, not Washington, D.C., we're looking to work with them. They were wanting to push the attempted rape, which was fine. All right, that's their felony, but it wound up matching this a little bit easier because they didn't have a solicitation law, if I remember right, that actually, or electronic solicitation that met the type of operation we were doing. And I believe Hawaii was the other state that had something similar. I can't remember exactly, but I think those were the two states. Either way, most states have a similar law like this, and some states have human trafficking laws that meet this, right? Alabama would be one of them. Florida would be one of them. Indiana, I think, was pushing one. I don't know if it ever got approved via legislation. I think Arkansas approved one not too long ago. I think Arkansas has one. So either way, this guy shows up for what he thinks is a 14-year-old girl. He gets arrested. Solicitation, travel, because he's showing up to buy what he believes to be a 14-year-old girl for sex. All in the messages, easy case, boom, done. Probable cause to rip his phone. We have to get into the phone because that's what our case is based off of, his phone and our phone messaging each other, so we need that. So that's the probable cause for the arrest that we made and for the prosecution that's going to take place. And when we rip his phone, he had over 1,000 images, child porn images, but it was him having sex with his own 18-month-old daughter. He was producing and distributing child porn. That's where the feds like to get involved, because now they have a good case. Then they'll run those down, because now we legally obtain this information that you would not have been able to obtain any other way. This guy did not have a criminal history. Nobody was going to get him on a traffic stop or be able to get into his phone. They get that, and then you have the feds drop the hammer on him, and they were able, as much as the feds are terrible at, they are really good at tracking down where things go with let's say child porn, where it's being brought from, and they were able to get warrants. And without going too much into it, a buddy of mine that's an FBI TFO called and said, hey, based on these operations, we got guys in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and this dude was arrested out of Mississippi. So as you look at that across the board, that is what we want to do. But we didn't have to have a single victim show up and testify.
Yeah.
Because everything that we needed was right there on the phone. And most of these guys will admit to what they're doing anyway as well, because they're not the usual suspects, for lack of a better word. You're not going to find them in any normal illicit criminal activity. Sometimes you will, but very rarely. And so that's the program. That's what we put together. That's what we do. Work with the local agency. The feds will partner with that local agency as well sometimes. I'm still sworn as a TFO federally with Homeland Security and as a deputy in the state of Alabama. But whenever we do these operations of Covenant Rescue Group, I don't use my law enforcement credentials. It's a combat advisor role. I go in to sit and our team goes in and sits and trains these local law enforcement agencies. This is how you do this style of operation. Then we set up a live operation for them. We perform the operation, and they make the arrest, they make the cases, and we're just there to advise and say, this is how you need to do it to make sure that everything is met.
In this particular case, this guy you said was arrested out of Mississippi.
Yeah, I think he came from Mississippi to Alabama, if I remember right.
Has that gone through the full?
It's done. Yeah, that's the only reason I can mention it. Okay. Yeah, the guy who made the commander of the unit that helped made the state case sent it to us about a year and a half ago. I think it met all that stuff, and I want to say I think he was my age, 39 if I remember right. But he was in his mid to late 30s, and I want to say he got like 30 or 40 years, for state and federal charges. I can't remember the specifics, but hey, he got exactly what he got, the full extent of whatever the full extent was that he'd get. And it's different per state, and that's all we want. That's all we hope for. We want to be able to say report to the parking lot for the firing squad, because we've killed people overseas for a lot less. However, with that being said, we don't live in that world. Our country is a first world country that has a justice system, and if you use the justice system appropriately, it can effectively work, and that's all we're trying to do.
I imagine a guy like that in prison isn't going to last long either, right?
That's the other thing, is they don't last long. I mean, it's I'm not necessarily going to say that they kill them, but those guys are
they get what's coming.
Yeah, they get what's coming to them. Especially a guy that does something like that. That was probably the worst that I had ever seen. And you see young kids overseas, but going back to the statistic you asked about, did the parents really sell? The reason we focus not solely on child exploitation, but that is our primary, it's our primary aim, is because anytime a child's involved, it is human trafficking by the definition of state law in most states or federal law. If a child's involved, it's human trafficking. So that's the first thing. So now we know we're taking donor dollars or whatever money we have, and we're using it effectively for human trafficking like we talk about. That's what our nonprofit wants to do. We want to be good stewards of what's provided for us to do the operation. So that's the first thing. That's why we focus on children. The second thing, 93% of children that are exploited by somebody they know. 36% of those are family members that exploit the child. Is it 57? Make sure my math's right. Yeah, 57% are somebody that knows them, a babysitter, a coach, something like that. So only 7% are unknown. So the idea of the free candy van or the random cartel member that steals your kid and throws them into a human trafficking circle and it goes on and you don't know where that kid went, that's only 7% of the time. The other 93% are those individuals that are a person of trust is what we would call them, whether a family member or somebody that knows them. Now, here's why it's important. We're targeting on the one end that 7% because that's the easiest thing to target. When we tap that guy on the 7%, that guy's showing up for the random 14-year-old girl just because he wants to pay for sex because he's a weirdo. That is what we use as our probable cause. We build a case off of that, but that's our probable cause to dig deeper into their life and find other victims. Every operation we run, we do one a month. We average about 10 arrests per operation with that local agency. And we're 100% on prosecutions, knock on wood, right? Defense attorneys always try to get in and molest the case, not because it's a bad case, but all they're trying to do is discredit the organization, whether it's a law enforcement organization, discredit us and the training we provide. That's what they're trying to do in the eyes of a jury because all these things go to jury trial. Generally speaking, they go to jury trial. And so they'll try to negatively impact the perception of a jury member on the case because if you have one hung juror, you're done, right? Yeah. So that's the game we're playing. We're not just playing the arrest the guy when they show up, not wave the phone in their face and say, you're a dirtbag, you've done the wrong thing, not beating them up. We want to successfully arrest them so that we then can go to the prosecution or to the prosecutor and have a successful prosecution. And the judge, the jury, anybody involved in the system doesn't have any questions. They're like, this dude is definitely a bad dude. And then also on the back end, for any of the individuals that have victims tied to them, we're able to find those victims. And the feds really like getting involved on that end.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you'd have to ask yourself what kind of criminal defense attorney would take a case like that.
So criminal defense attorneys will take any case, and I would say rightfully so, right? We do live in a country where you can you have the right to you have the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So the burden of proof should be on the law enforcement agency, should be on the government. Oftentimes we don't get that. Oftentimes you're guilty until proven innocent. So I understand, at least on the front end, why some defense attorneys will take it because, man, there's a lot of guys that haven't done any of this. They might have a pissed off ex-wife. They might have a girlfriend or maybe parents of a family that's mad, and they'll say, this is what took place, or they'll get a kid to say something, this is what took place. So there is a lot of that. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is show that this is not what that is.
Right.
These individuals we're targeting, they are truly the predators that we need to go after in our society. The guys and women that are targeting our kids, we're going after them. We're not going after, the guy who might just be a regular dude, but he's in a bad divorce or he's in some kind of bad situation where he's being accused of something he didn't do.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. The kind of cascade of other victims that, as you put it, kind of fall in the wake of these guys. If you catch one, there's usually 50 if it's a female, 150 if it's a male. Is it a challenge to identify who those people are, or is it relatively easy electronically because there's always a tie-in?
That's a good question. So, and it's kind of I don't know if it's a yes or no answer. So, if we have the digital tie-in, it is a little bit easier to find. But let's say we don't. We still have victims. Now, you might not get them on the victims that are in their path. But every op we run within a local agency, because we'll run it with agents. We'll do a training, then we'll run an op with a local agency. Again, we're just advisors on the op. I'm not, making the arrests or anything like that. We're not making the cases. We just help the agency do the appropriate cases, work with the prosecutor's office. If we get subpoenaed, we'll show up. This is what we do. This is how we do it. We're here training. Very much what we would call a combat advisor role from the SEAL teams, right? When we do that, our name, Covenant Rescue Group, is out there, right, in the media or whatever. Every op we run, we have at least one, most of the time multiple. And it might be underage, it might be women of age. Victims reach out to us and say, we saw that you were a part of training that led to the arrest of, and they'll name whoever it is, this individual. And they'll just say, we don't want to be known. We want to remain anonymous. Thank you. He raped me and sold me to his buddy when I was 13. That's the most recent one. I remember that one message we got. He raped me and sold me to a friend of his when I was 13, and I never knew what to do. This lady's like 37 now.
Oh.
So you're bringing justice to victims who the system never provided justice for, and they didn't know how to go about it. We had one lady. Now, she was an illegal immigrant. She reached out anonymously. This is a couple of years ago. We arrested a dude. He got put on an ICE hold because he was an illegal. I say we. The agency arrested the dude on one of the operations. He got put on an ICE hold. That's Immigration Customs Enforcement. He's being held because he's an illegal, and he was wound up being deported back to Guatemala, I believe is where he's from. He gets deported back. So they don't go through our judicial system because they can't. They're not citizens. He gets deported back, but she reached out. She was in her mid-30s, Hispanic lady. She said, I didn't know who to call. Again, she's here illegally. I understand we got all that stuff going on right now, but she was being victimized by this individual. He'd snatch her, black bag her, lock her up in a trailer. I'm just telling you what she wrote in the message to us. I don't want to be known, but thank y'all for arresting him. He's been doing this to me for the last 2 or 3 years. He would get her just random times, lock her up in a trailer for 3 or 4 days at a time, make her do videos with her, make her do sex acts, perform it, and then he would turn her loose. Who is she going to tell? She's not going to tell anybody because she's not going to tell the police. She's afraid she's going to be deported. And all she sent was, I want to remain anonymous, but thank you, because this guy was victimizing her. Wow. We get that every operation.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't find, now we didn't find her at his phone. She wasn't in there, but we found her because she reached out and talked to us. So that has probably been the most surprising thing to me, is that I don't believe all statistics, but that statistic, the DOJ and the American Psychiatric Association study that shows that there are victims in these individuals' wakes until they're prosecuted. Buddy, that's held pretty true. Yeah. So we are going after real perpetrators of real crimes, and at a minimum, providing some level of justice and reprieve to the victims that they have created.
Yeah. That's amazing work, man. I'm thankful for you guys doing what you do as a father of daughters. I mean, that's something that, now that they're a little older, it's not that I don't still worry about that, but especially when they're in that, early teen years, it's a terrifying prospect. Just so that I'm clear, so if you take and break it down from a percentage standpoint, so 100% of the child sex trafficking cases that exist in the United States, only 7% of them are abductions from completely unknown entities.
Yeah, that's about the statistic. That's what it holds to. Most of them are impacted by somebody they know, a person of trust, which means it looks a little bit different than what we often think Hollywood shows, or than what we often refer to as human trafficking. Now, here's the other thing. Now you get to the of-age women, let's say, and the of-age men, the sex work industry, for lack of a better word. Now that industry, they're at a larger risk of being trafficked, but every of-age person is not a human trafficking victim. Although human trafficking does happen within the sex work industry, everybody in the sex work industry is not being trafficked. But one thing I have noticed that to held true, anytime we deal with just prostitution or the sex work industry, every one of those women that we perform an interview with were abused in that way as a child.
Yeah.
Or sold as a child. Like it's not like they turned 18, 19, or 20 and just, got on drugs and decided they're going to do something. It happened to them when they were younger, and this is now a residual effect that I've seen. And so that has been, how do you combat that? I don't know how you combat that. You almost can't.
Because at that age, technically, I mean, not that it's legal. I know it's illegal either way, but it's sort of voluntary.
Sort of voluntary.
You could argue that it's really not because it was so conditioned at a young age.
That's right.
By the letter of the law, they would consider it voluntary.
Yeah, and I think here in Texas, it's a felony to purchase sex. I kind of disagree with that, to be honest with you, because now you're hitting both of them with a felony, whoever's purchasing and whoever's selling, and most of these women sell themselves.
Yeah.
A pimp nowadays, a lot of times, is this digital platform we have. Hey, you got some chicks that are smart. They'll make somebody send them $10 on, Cash App or something, and then they'll never show up to meet. Well, if they get 100 guys in a night to send them $10 each, well, they just made $1,000 that night without ever meeting anybody.
Yeah.
They just got to be convincing in how they do it. So there is a lot of that, but the days of and I'm not saying we don't see it, but the days of a pimp, selling their girl is over, and you've got this digital platform right here that adds a level of protection for some women.
So almost like the digital equivalent would be porn versus OnlyFans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. That's a great example. I use OnlyFans as an example a lot of times, but that's it. Yeah.
So within the scope of, it sounds like overwhelmingly in the underage sex trafficking cases, it's being done by a person of trust or even an actual family member. Is there any advice you could offer people with kids because how do you identify that? Because there's that almost, not almost, I mean, it's if you're even suspective of that and it's not happening, I know most people would always rather err on the side of offending a family member than letting that go. But
right.
But how do you guys give advice to people as to how to try to navigate that, like signs, symptoms? Like,
we have a team of young ladies that go around and train, do education for schools. So sometimes there's approval at the school level, they have to come in, and parents, and they go around and they train people on that. And one of the biggest things that they talk about and that I talk about is this device right here. That's going to tell you a lot. The messages that are being sent, right? So it's more so than just even the physical contact. It is somebody trying to steal your child's heart and mind with this device or whatever messaging platforms they have. So the first thing we say is be very in tune with your child's communications, I guess, for lack of a better word, because we communicate on this so much. You have young kids that have this. So that'd be the first thing that would be a telltale sign. If all of a sudden, you got, Uncle so-and-so, he's messaging some questionable stuff to my little girl who's 11, we're going to sit down and have a conversation. Does that make sense?
I don't know if it'd be a conversation.
Yeah, it might just be a fist fight, but but that would be, or a coach. And that's generally what we see in that person of trust. And there might be a coach, there might be, a law enforcement officer. I heard something recently. There was some deputy who was an SRO at a school who is messaging one of the 14 or 15-year-old girls at that school. That dad was irate. He came up there and was trying to deal with it. Well, yeah, the only way you see that is if you're involved in that. Yeah. So being involved in the communications of your kids, obviously being involved with who they're around. There are certain people in your life you can trust. There are certain people you can't trust, but being effective in that. But and I've said this before on podcast, and I'll say it again. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was like a notorious sex predator, right? And I actually heard this from somebody else a long time ago, and I've just started using it more. But they asked him, I said, what did you look for in a kid? Now, he was in a commonly white demographic in Indiana, I believe it was. But he said it really wasn't the demographic. He didn't care if it was, he said most of the kids around him were white, but it didn't matter if it was black, Hispanic, whatever. He didn't care so much about the demographic. He didn't care about whether they were a boy or girl, even though he leaned more toward boys, from what I understand here in his interview, his conversation. He said he would look at one thing every time. Was the father involved in the child's life? If the father was involved, the father was a threat, and he wouldn't go after that child. He went after kids of single mothers more often than not because he could build rapport with that mother, and he said he would finally build enough rapport to say, hey, why don't you have a night out to yourself and I'll stay here and watch the kids. And he said that's where he would start the grooming process. It was a process for him. But as a dad, as a man, I found that unbelievably interesting. Was the father a threat? So if you're a dad listening to this, and I imagine you got a large demographic of males that listen to it, are you a threat? Be a threat, right? That's a good thing to be a threat, especially on behalf of your child. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that I have to be some UFC cage fighter or a Navy SEAL or any, super tough guy. You're a dad. You're there for your kids. Don't always be down here in my phone all the time. I need to be aware of who's around them and what's going on. Don't be consumed with the ball game or with hunting or with fishing or whatever it is in your life that consumes you, with work. Be consumed with that child, at least enough to be threatening, because even if you don't see what's going on, if you're perceived as a threat, that is the first thing that at least one of the most notorious pedophiles in the U.S., and I'll try to find his name and send it to you, and I'll send you the clip of the video of him saying that. That is at least what he looked at, is the dad involved? Is the dad a threat? And if they were, it deterred him. Yeah. Be a deterrent for your kid. Be a threat for your kid.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, having spent so much time from a dog training standpoint, we were talking at the beginning of the interview about presence and nonverbal communication stuff. Like I really do think that there's such an element of that exists if you meet somebody, if you walk up to your daughter talking to a grown man and he is one of those types of guys, like the way that you shake his hand, the way that you look at him, the way that you talk to him in that initial 30 to 60 seconds, I think can make all the difference in
100%.
The fucking world about 100%. How he, like, if you're looking at him like, just almost suspect. It's such a feeling, though, of being able to kind of size somebody up and look at him like, dude, don't, like, without saying anything, you can say a lot.
That's right.
And I think more men, in our society need to think about that and focus on that and understand, what that looks like, what it feels like, and be active in that way, because I think that can make a huge difference.
Dude, it not only does it make a huge difference for the individuals that are possibly targeting your kids, because they're out there. Trust me, I'm a guy this is what we do. They are out there, they're targeting your kids. But not only does it make a huge individual for them, or a huge difference for that individual, it also does for your kid, because kids are very perceptive, even at a young age, right? My 3-year-old is unbelievably perceptive, blows me away the stuff she says, right?
Yeah, I mean, more so at that age when there's far less verbal communication.
There you go. They have to be perceptive, right? But when your kid sees that, now they're like, Dad cares. Now they're like, Mama cares, and so they're more willing to come to you about things as opposed to being afraid that they're going to get in trouble or they're going to get somebody else in trouble, because they know that you care for them. So I think that's twofold. And the last thing I'll say on that is again, the free candy van is not, now a random guy pulled up on a motorcycle. I went and found that guy, went to his house. He was 16 years old, I think. Put up on a motorcycle, my girls are playing in my front yard, and we live out. We're not like we live in a place to where
that's normal.
Well, where that's normal, where our girls are not safe playing in the front yard, though, right? They're playing in the front yard. My wife's inside, we're in the kitchen. The little one's taking a nap. He pulls up on a motorcycle and says, "Hey, you girls, you better come over here and get on my motorcycle." Now, my oldest daughter said no and kind of backed the middle one, my youngest, backed her up and was standing, and she was also like no, and they kind of stood and they were backing into the house. And my oldest talks about it. She was like, I was just trying to keep the mailbox between me and him. Where they were trying to get to where the mailbox and this gravel pile we had, we were working on the driveway, keep it. I'm like, yeah, all right, that's what I'm talking about. Good job, baby. Good job. Keeping as much between me and the bad guy as possible. And they went inside. That's rare. Now, that happened to my family, but that's still that 7% that some random person targets. And I was able to find that guy and go talk with his dad.
How did that go?
The kid, he's 16, but he's not all there, right? He has there's a mental issue, and that's something we have seen. There is a mental issue. Doesn't mean the criminal act won't take place, but we deal with that differently on the law enforcement side than like the 40-year-old coach who is targeting kids. That makes sense. It looks different. So there was a mental issue, but I basically told the dad, I said, hey, I better never see that kid on my street again with a motorcycle. There's no reason for him to be up there, number one. But number two, this happened. And I talked with the kid, and he was kind of sitting there, he's like, yes, sir, very respectful. And the dad was like, well, I mean, we did, my kid, I've got my granddaughter lives with us, and, it's a lot of meth, within that family in this, backwoods part of Alabama. But the conversation went fine, but I haven't heard hide nor hair from them,
Yeah.
Very cordial, but I'm not gonna beat up a 16-year-old kid, but I'm gonna beat the brakes off your dad in front of you if you come up to my house again and ever talk to my girls, especially ones that don't know you that are 9 and 6. I mean, it's still not right, but it's different if you're 16, she's 15, and y'all talk in school all the time. Hey, hop on my motorcycle, we're going for a ride. I'm still gonna be pissed off as a dad.
Yeah.
But that looks different than you showing up as a 16-year-old telling a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old to get on your bike.
Yeah, that you don't know.
Yeah. Those things don't happen often, though. And so, but I will tell that's a real story that did happen to us as a family not too long ago. So all of that being said, training your kids to respond appropriately to when that does happen, but being that threat or that deterrent for your kids, because you're going to deter people. It's just like the cop car with no cop sitting in it, but they'll put it out in front of the school.
Yeah.
Not because that cop car is going to do anything if somebody shows up trying to do something in school, but it's an active deterrent.
Right.
And that's all you can. That's the best initial thing you could do.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Do you guys have a statistical grasp of, and I know it's impossible to know because there's God knows how many people who haven't been caught, but is there any type of range of estimate in terms of whether it's a number or a percentage of the population that is actively engaged in sex trafficking?
We do have that, and we'll call it sex trafficking by definition as opposed to what we think it is, right? These are just people who are either buying or selling children for sex, essentially. That's so. Let's leave it at that as opposed to what everybody thinks in the Hollywood, okay?
So you would make the distinction between actually money exchanging hands versus just trying to solicit it?
No, I wouldn't make, so that would be attempted versus actual. Does that make sense?
Right, but I mean, like, is the distinguishing factor of it being labeled from a statistical standpoint sex trafficking hinging on the fact that somebody is trying to offer money for it versus just it trying to happen?
No, not legally necessarily, depending on state law and obviously federal law, but not legally, but in our minds, I guess. Does that make sense? So oftentimes what is legal is not, it's like, well, in my mind, I don't really think of that as sex trafficking. I think of that as, pedophilia, let's say, right? By the definition of law, let's say 13A6, 152, and 153 in the state of Alabama, it's human trafficking attempt, which is still that felony that you're looking for and what you're looking to combat, right? Just because money doesn't swap hands. Does that make sense? So it's the same thing. I'm just trying to break it down for our mindset, because when people see it a lot of times, they're like, well, that's not what I envisioned human trafficking to be. I envisioned cartels snatching kids and selling.
No, I guess, what I'm trying to understand, I guess, is legally, is there a distinction? So, because to me, I'm no less worried about a 40-year-old trying to solicit sex from a 9-year-old not paying for it, but just trying to solicit it. Are you putting those in the same camp?
Yes, we put those in the same camp. And so the percentage would be, and this is based on our operations that we've done, so this is a percentage that we've found. And sometimes it ebbs and flows and goes up and down. But what I can tell you across the board, people say, well, how do you know this happens in my area? It happens in every area. And it's really just a numbers game. If we talk to 1,000 people who are willing to show up and purchase a person for sex, okay? They think they're getting an of-age person. They reach out initially. They think they're getting a 19, 20-year-old girl. And we quickly put in there, hey, you cool with younger chicks or whatever it is, right? Hey, I'm not old enough to drive. Can you meet me? How old are you? I'm 14. Yeah, that's cool. You're not the cops, are you? That's generally how the message thread goes. So of 1,000 people, 900 of them will just stop talking to you as soon as you tell them the age, or we'll tell you to pound sand, or we'll say, hey, you need help, don't do this, and that's it. But they'll cut the message off. Does that make sense? 100, so 10%, will entertain it. And then 10 will actually show up. And those are the ones that we're looking for. Now, we still track with the 100 that would entertain it, right? We still try to find out who they are, and we could help the local law enforcement agency build out a spreadsheet, kind of like when we used to target guys overseas. You look at different numbers, and you had your threat matrix to figure out who you wanted to go after.
Yeah.
We'll do a similar thing with the agency, but we're looking for the 10 who are actually showing up, because when they show up, now it's not they can be arrested solely based on the message thread. And we've gone to places where they'll get warrants based on the message thread and go and get them just because the intent is there in that. We don't generally like that because that oftentimes leaves a hole in a case. Maybe this guy had to come to Jesus meeting. Maybe, again, as a Christian, I believe in grace and mercy being extended. What if he knew what he was doing was wrong and he decided not to do it anymore? Doesn't mean that you don't still track with it, but the guy that's showing up, they've gone all the way through with it.
Yeah.
That's a guy that would have bought that child and had sex with that child, and that's a guy who probably has more children in their lives that they are related to or that they know that are being impacted or that they're selling.
Does the money exchange impact the legality of being able to arrest them and punish them to the same degree?
Not when it deals with children.
Okay.
Only when it deals with adults.
Okay.
Only when it deals with adults, but as it deals with children, we haven't worked in a state yet. Of course, we haven't worked in all 50 states. We've worked in a lot of, we've worked in 16 different states. So each set of state laws are different, but that solicitation and travel law is about the same. No, money doesn't impact it.
Okay.
Human trafficking, we'll use Alabama because that's the one I'm most familiar with, 13A6152. You can look it up. There's an attempt side. We worked with with some state legislators to get that changed to where we can do attempt for specific reasons within our state, but it just helps speed up the process. You don't have to have money, but you kind of, to really help you out, especially as a defense attorney starts trying to pull the case apart, is if they acknowledge something to pay for it in that human trafficking attempt. You don't have to have it, but it's preferred to have it because it looks better on the case. And they might say, hey, well, I'll bring you a case of beer, or bring me a case of beer, right?
Yeah.
That's if you bring a case of beer to pay for it, we're good. Yeah. That's something a 14 or a 15-year-old would ask for if we're chatting that. Or obviously, if you're doing it as a parent or somebody selling a child, you're going to want them to agree to, hey, look, I'm here. You're going to bring me $200. Yep, I'll bring you $200. So you want that in there. It just increases the validity of your case. It's not required.
Yeah. Is there a most ridiculous request for payment-wise, both in just the request itself, and then also what's the cheapest you've ever seen somebody try to sell their own children for?
It's I don't know if the cheapest I've seen somebody sell their own children for. I mean, it's anywhere from $25 to a couple $100. Like it's not like it's a lot of money. Put it this way. The price is so, there's no price on my kids, but the price is so low, it's oftentimes mind-boggling on what people will actually either sell themselves for or sell their kids for. Probably the easiest one we've ever done, we had a guy agree to, I'm trying to think, we had a guy recently, I can't talk much about it, but she said, hey, look, I think he sent a picture of himself. She said, you look cute. Just bring me a box of donuts or something and a Coke. And he showed up, or maybe it's like some kind of like a bag of those little white donuts or something. He bring me some donuts and a Coke, and he showed up with that actual stuff as a payment. Well, that makes it even easier because now he's showing up with that stuff in hand. You don't have to have money, exchange hands like you do with an adult, like on a prostitution sting.
Yeah. In terms of the decoy crew that you guys have or use, now I want to be as careful as possible as to not tip any potential fuckbag's hand to how you guys do it. So I'll let you navigate that. Yeah. But I'm curious as to from a training standpoint and kind of a strategy standpoint for what you can share. Can you talk a little bit to that?
So what we do with the decoys, the hard thing is finding law enforcement officers that look the part. And when you do, they're normally young and new, and they're unbelievably stiff, right? Because they've learned officer safety. They don't want to get too close. They act very much like a cop, especially a young cop. We do use law enforcement officers if the agency has them provide, but again, they're few and far between. So we have to bring in and train our own decoys. The first thing we do, me and none of the guys on my team deal with any of the decoys. Lindsay, our office manager, she sits down and does an initial interview, and there's 10 questions that we've all come up with. These are what need to be asked, and she goes through it woman to woman with them, and she's very serious. Hey, these are the things you need to be honest about. A lot of girls, have been sexually abused, and she asked that. Have you ever been touched by a man? Have you ever been sexually abused? These are things that our decoys answer because that can negatively impact how they actually do on an operation.
If it's a yes, then that could.
No, it's just, okay, if it's a yes, you realize that is what you're putting yourself out here for, because we've had girls that have had that happen in the past, and it brings up maybe trauma.
Sure.
And it negatively impacts their ability to be a decoy.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Good. Well, we're very open and upfront with them, and it's Lindsay who does that. We're very open and upfront with them.
Yeah.
So now you've got once you go through those 10 questions, we put them on a live operation immediately. They don't have to do anything. You're just going to sit in the room because we've been through the whole process, told them what you're going to do. They're okay with the questions, showed them videos of what you're going to do, let them even watch a live operation from the safety of our command and control element, and see what takes place. And then they get to the room, and they're like, I can't do this. Yeah. So we make them go to the room first. We make them sit here, hey, now you're going to watch these decoys work. This is what you're going to be doing, because when they see it live and in person, that's been the one thing that has made girls say, I can't do this anymore. So, or I'm sorry, I can't do this. So we try to front load all that. And if they're like, yeah, hey, I'm good with this, then we put them through training, and then we put them on an op to shadow a decoy that has been doing it for a little while. And then we finally put them on their first operation. And that's how we do it. We normally cut their age off at about 25. For the feds to adopt in a case, they really want law enforcement officers, even though that's a policy thing. That's not so much required. We have had the feds adopt some of our cases with girls forward, but the biggest thing they don't want is the age reduction app stuff. So our goal is to not doctor or use AI or use anything, because I can make me look like a girl and bring somebody in. Our thing is to be proof of life that looks legitimate at the door, so we can say without a shadow of a doubt, this individual legitimately thought he was going to have sex with a 14-year-old. Yeah. And so that's about as much as I can go into how we use the decoys and train them and prep them.
No, I appreciate that. I guess because of technology being so not just involved, but advanced, I guess, with the ability to interact and pretend to be somebody else, do you guys, could you not just use you and I pretending to, if it's just via text and it could be doctored photos, like why even need to use
proof of life is what we call it.
So like when they're actually showing up? Or?
Yeah, so when they're there, you'll get guys, we've had them, he's out in house, it doesn't matter. You remember Monty LeClaire?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Monty, of course, he was in charge of sniper school when I transitioned over there before I got out. He was working as a deputy up with a sheriff's office who worked with in Indiana, and he was working with counter surveillance stuff, and he got to see it firsthand. So if you talk with Monty, you can call him and he'll tell you all about it. Like, he was outside on counter surveillance all night. These jokers will show up and watch for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. The longest I've been counter surveilled is 6 hours that we know of. And so we're looking for them, and they're looking to make sure it's not a law enforcement sting. And so they want proof of life. So they might say, hey, can you walk to the stairwell? Can you walk outside? Can you go to the window and wave? Again, because they know how cops do it. Now, some places they might be good with the case that we made strictly off the phone, but that's not good enough. We want this guy to prove that he believes he has purchased a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old or wherever you're at. Yeah. And so we have the proof of life aspect, and that's really what it is. And that's that last set the hook, I guess, that you're trying to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To show intent, to show the intent.
Yeah. At this point, can you say how many cases you guys have been able to
well, I can tell you, I know last year, just because I saw it the other day, I spoke at an event for their organization. Last year, from February when we did our first training operation all the way till November, which was our last one, we had 97 felony arrests, and that was across the nation. And all of those cases hadn't met their disposition, but the vast majority of them have, and that's 100%. I think the year before we had about the same. I can't remember what we had 3 years ago, but I think we're probably pretty close to 300 total. But the goal for us, now if we take it one step further, the goal is not for us to just do these operations and make the arrests. The benefit is when we work with an agency, what we love, we want to work ourselves out of a job. There's 18,000 police jurisdictions across the nation. At the current rate we're going, it's going to take us 350 years to hit them all. So our goal is for that agency to do it on their own. And so when we get emails back and we have agencies like, hey, we just did 15 on this operation of our own and so forth and so on, we're probably closer to 700 or 1,000 with agencies that have repeated what we've taught them to do without us being there.
Yeah.
And that's really the ultimate goal. That's the only way you're going to stop human trafficking, exploitation of children, is to get the local law enforcement agency, the closest form of government to the people, actively working on it.
Yeah. I guess going back to the only 7% of kind of how movies and media tend to portray sex trafficking, have you uncovered or found that there are highly sophisticated networks, or is that a rarity?
That's a rarity.
Yeah.
I would say no. I'd almost say they don't exist. You know, people will say they do, but
Well, so like the Epstein and Diddy,
so
the elite.
So think of it this way: if you go back to that 36 and 57% of known people, whether it's family member or known person, right? So that's 93% total are known. Look at who Diddy impacted. They were all people within his sphere of influence. It wasn't the random person that was stolen or whatever. Look who Epstein impacted. They were all people that were somehow within his sphere of influence. It wasn't a random kid who was stolen and sold on a sex island or whatever. And that is, they just had a larger sphere of influence than, let's say, the redneck meth head at, North Alabama, or, the random, guy here in Texas or wherever you're at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically, the Epstein and Diddy stuff, their sphere of influence is bigger, but like the subjects, the children being trafficked in that case are still probably going to be people that are family of people that they know.
somehow attached to them to where it still falls in that 93%. Yeah. As a matter of fact, all of the victims you hear from the Epstein case and the lady,
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah. Right? So Epstein didn't kill himself, by the way, just so everybody knows.
I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, I know. I remember hearing you say that on Fox News a long time ago. I was like, that's the best thing I know. Yeah, but you haven't been back on Fox News since then. They got mad at that.
I can't imagine I'll get invited back.
That's right. Piss on him. Yeah, he definitely didn't kill himself, right? But but you see Maxwell, it might have been people that she knew, and she was kind of grooming them for that. But it's a person of trust. And it's the same thing with Diddy. You got all these rappers. I remember hearing 50 Cent talk about Diddy, and I'm not into all the rappers and all that. I remember like years ago, they were all talking about him in that way, and then all of a sudden this comes out. It's going to be people within that sphere of influence who have that trust and groom that person. So it's still that 93%, because if you listen to victims talk, they were somehow tied to it through a person they trusted who said, this is a person we should trust, and that's what drug them into it. It wasn't stealing a random kid and selling them to, on Sex Island.
Yeah.
But it's still the same problem, right? It's still the same issue exists.
Yeah, just at a larger magnitude.
That's right.
From a child porn standpoint and its influence or kind of government electronic prosecutorial handshake standpoint, how big of a role is that playing in terms of, like, do any part of your teams like try to find that and work backwards to, or is
we don't? So we'll find these guys and work forward, right? Because that's the easier way to do it based on just how our laws actually work and how they revolve around the Constitution.
Yeah.
Because now I have probable cause to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like the what's the young man's name? Ryan. He was on Sean's podcast. You might have, I don't know if you interviewed him or not. He's like the world's best hacker.
Oh yeah, I haven't, but I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. He was on the PBD podcast and all that talking. I think his last name is it McDonald?
I can't remember.
It's super nice guy, man. And he is trying to do the best he can. And I talked with him on the phone for a little while after that. But he has all of this stuff that he found and he's trying to work back. The problem is how he obtained it is illegal, so now it's part of what's, I guess, fruits of the poisonous tree, and it will create a null pros if you're trying to prosecute a case.
Yeah.
What we're doing is we're finding it on the front end, and now we have probable cause based on this arrest and this solid local case we just made to now we can go out and legally obtain all that stuff, and now you can just keep hitting them with more and more and more as you find more victims or more people it's tied to.
No, that makes sense. From a punishment standpoint, I know you said the one guy in Mississippi that you mentioned got 30 or 40 years, and he's a 40-year-old guy. Do you guys have any input on whether making a federal mandatory minimum statute, or like, do you guys get in the weeds with any of that? Do you think personally that that's enough?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, you ought to be able to kill them. You know, once you see this happen, I mean, that's my honest opinion. And that's a scriptural thing, by the way. You see in the Old Testament, you see guys impacting children in this manner. Death was the preferred method of sentencing and justice. But that being said, no, we don't. The state of Alabama pushed it recently to where basically it's life in prison, and I don't think the judge has any say, or it's like, hey, if they're caught actually trafficking a kid, so if we get them on this attempt, right, and then we see where they've actually trafficked a kid, they make a case, now it's life in prison. If you just get somebody on attempt, they might get between 3 and 15 years, depending on what I've seen. But as you add more stuff to it, which this allows us to find the other stuff they're doing, you find real victims, now you're getting heavier sentencing from both the state and the federal governments. But each state is different, and each prosecutorial jurisdiction in the state is different. So Alabama, we have 67 counties. We've got 41. I think I've said before it's 43. That's incorrect. It's 41 prosecutorial jurisdictions, and then you've got 2 federal jurisdictions, which is going to be the northern district of Alabama, and then the middle district of Alabama, which covers the rest of Alabama. So you have 43 total, but 41 state and 2 federal, right?
Yeah.
So those districts, even though they're operating under federal or state law, depending on a jury pool, depending on judges, is going to depend on how a lot of those cases are made and how far that goes with the sentencing aspect of it. But the one thing that's important is whenever you hit anybody with this, they all have to register. Now they're tracked. Now you're tracking with these individuals. So even if they get 1 year in jail, at least you're able to track with them. And then when you see them do something they're not supposed to do in that process, the Marshal Service does a really good job of tracking these dudes down. Now they are done, right? Yeah, once you have somebody that's already convicted of this and registered as a sex offender.
Will that be something as simple as they were within a certain distance of a school, and that breaks
Yeah, depending on the state and the area, yes. Depending on what the disposition of their case is, yes. Or even messaging a kid, even reaching out to you. I mean, they don't even have to go as far as showing up to buy a kid for sex. You don't have to catch them having sex with a kid. They have been keyholed into where you can more easily target them, keep an eye on them, and make sure that they are not targeting your children or other people in society.
Do you have any, from a statistical standpoint, any reference of how many registered sex offenders there are in the United States, and what percentage ballpark that you think that makes up of the people who are actually doing it?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I don't. I probably should know that. I can look it up real quick, but I would say this. Whether they're registered or not, what you see is in people who are looking to have an illicit relationship with anybody, 1% of them, going back to that 1,000 example, 10 actually showing up, 1% are willing to show up to have sex with kids. So how many people are in the nation? 350 million, so what's 1% of that? 3.5 million. 3.5 million people in this nation, by that statistic that we've seen on our operations, would be willing to show up to have sex with kids, whether they're a registered sex offender or not. I will say the other thing, some areas registered as a sex offender, you might not have done near as much. You might have got a guy got caught, pissing on a building in public, and somehow he got stuck registered as a sex offender, or a 19-year-old who was caught having sex with his 16-year-old girlfriend. Not saying that's right, you got to deal with that appropriately, but the parents were mad, the girl's parents were mad, and now this young man's registered as a sex offender. So when in reality he's not, right? So not all sex offenders are the guys that we're talking about here, and not all guys who are not sex offenders are not willing to show up for a child for sex.
Yeah, to me the most frightening component of that statistic is that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But that's also people who are willing to engage with a total stranger online, be prefaced with, kind of the dance that has to check all of the boxes to be an actual prosecuted or prosecutable crime. like that's still a pretty specific scenario. Like,
Yeah.
because that doesn't take into account the people who, it's a family, a distant family member, a cousin,
Yep.
A landscaper. I mean, whatever that. It has nothing to do with online. It's at Target. It's at, wherever.
That's
like,
exactly right.
so to me, like that could and probably expands that number exponentially to where you're talking, millions and millions of
Yeah.
people in this country that would be willing to do that.
That's exactly right. And for us, and I call it scratching the surface, but you teach the agency how to successfully do it. And you will find that person. You'll find that dad who's doing this to his kids. You'll find that uncle. You'll find that aunt. You will find them. And you can flip these operations to where you do reverse stings. You do all kinds of stuff. But the bread and butter, the easiest thing to show all agencies initially, because law enforcement agencies are not doing it. They might tell you they are, but they are not.
Yeah.
The closest thing to anybody doing it are the guys who are showing up and beating up people in Walmart, or the Chris Hansons in the world. But again, that's symbolism without substance, because we're not getting a prosecution off that.
Yeah.
They might get a prosecution off some of them, but it's for clicks and likes, and it's for the show. If it wasn't for us being a nonprofit, having to raise money to survive, I wouldn't be on this podcast talking about it. But we have to do that to run. I don't care who gets the credit. I don't care if anybody knows these bad guys exist. All I care about is that they're caught and successfully prosecuted, because that's what we need to mitigate the amount of victims in their wake is a successful arrest and prosecution.
I agree with that. I do think I would take it even a step further in that I do care that those people are known. I do
Right.
think that, that's one thing that tends to baffle me a bit is the lack of exposure that these types of cases get in the media and just in communities, where I do think, one, if the punishments were more severe, more public, more, I guess exposed,
Right.
that I would hope that would, help in deterring some of the people who are.
Oh, it most certainly would. I guess let me retract what I said. Making it known when you've made a successful arrest and prosecution, 100%. Just shaking a phone in somebody's face and punching them in the mouth and saying, "You're sick, you're going to show up for a 14-year-old girl," that's symbolism without substance, because you just either made this dude smarter, or what we've often seen, somebody with a mental disability, somebody who's not all there, and now you just committed assault. And most of the time, those guys will get rolled by local law enforcement for assaulting somebody. One of the biggest ones we've seen is a young man had autism. Right, he was autistic. Doesn't mean it doesn't need to be dealt with, but that looks a whole lot different than the high school wrestling coach.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I've got a couple of Patreon questions. Jack asks, what are the signs of being trafficked for the everyday person to pick up on?
Oh, man, that's good. So, obviously, standard trafficking as we think of it, that's 7%, if somebody is being sold by somebody random to them or whatever. Drug addiction is huge. Drug addiction would be one of them. The level of care, clothing, how they act around that parent, let's say, if it's a parent with a kid. We've seen it more now with the open border issues we've dealt with. 83,000 kids is what they said. I think it's more that have come across the border. Well, they're not tracked kids. So we're seeing that a lot more. Looking at kids, and you can tell if a kid is with their parents or not a lot of times. How does this kid respond? How is this kid acting? Are they taken care of? Are they well cared for? Dirty, tattered clothes, show injury, lack of being a kid or responding like a kid would normally respond. So if you're looking for the outside stuff, that's it. The big thing that I would say, for the majority of it, though, that other 93%, watch your kids, watch your nieces and nephews, whoever's in your sphere of influence, and be in tune with this right here, because this is how that child is going to most likely be targeted. They're not going to show up and take your child. They're going to talk your child right out of your house, or they're going to extort your child with an electronic device. That would be the most common way.
Yeah. No, it's great tips. One thing we didn't touch on a ton, but you just kind of broached it, was the immigrant part. I know you mentioned the one grown woman who fell into that category, but I've seen a lot of reports and statistics on how big of a problem that is with underage illegal immigrants coming across and then being taken advantage of. The number of unaccounted for minors that have come across the border and then just have basically disappeared, and there's no No idea where they're at, who they're with, what's going on. I mean, it's staggering.
Yeah.
Like how many hundreds of thousands of children fall into that category, and it's hard not to assume the worst.
My assumption would be about 500,000, and that's just a Jared Hudson assumption from talking to people. I don't think it's the 83,000 that's reported. I think it's probably closer to half a million. But I'll tell you why without going too much into it. So before the election, this has changed a good bit now, but before the election, people would come in, they would go to a port of entry. They changed it to where you don't have to burn across the border anymore in an illegal spot. You can go to a port of entry. We're going to let you in, and they're going to put you within a court system, let's say somewhere in Texas, right? You have Dallas, Texas, written on a piece of paper. They're going to put you in that court system. They're going to sign you up, and now you've got to wait 18 months for your citizenship request to be adjudicated, or whatever process that is. They're pushing them past the election. So my assumption was it was to do stuff with the election, like what we saw during COVID and all that stuff, But all of that being said, when they would come to the border, they were getting biometrics checked on anybody. Remember, biometrics ran overseas, like the blood, the eye, the fingerprint. They do all that. They have those biometric machines at the ports of entry. Let people in. If you appear to be over 18, or if you appear to be over 17, you got biometrics run. If you appear to be under 18, right, they didn't run any biometrics on you. So you would have guys showing up with kids, and they're like, hey, these are my children or whatever. Okay, run biometrics on you. You're going to, Dallas, Texas. Your court date is here, or is at this time, at this location. This is when you need to be there. And they would turn them loose in the country. So these guys are using these kids to get across, and then those kids are, they're not with them. So now they're here, but the kids are here untracked. And that is where your untracked kids have come from. So technically they've entered the country legally, but because they changed how that looks, they're actually here illegally. And do you think they're showing up for their citizenship adjudication?
No, they're 7 years down the road.
It's 7 years down the road, and they're not showing up with their kids. It's not their kids. There might be a few of them that's like that, but it's not generally their kids.
Yeah. Man, it's just, I don't even know where to start with how
it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Justin asks, why are the convictions so weak for people convicted of sex crimes against children? Shouldn't sex offenders and traffickers be put away forever? Why do we afford them the freedom to possibly offend again? And what do other countries do with these kind of offenders?
I don't know what other countries do with these kind of offenders. It's harder to get these offenders in other countries. However, in our country, again, we look at it countrywide, but we're actually all a bunch of states. And that's like Africa would be like the same size as North America, right? I mean, I don't know if the actual size might be different, and you've got all these little different countries which are really like the size of a state. Like the country of Zambia is the same size as the state of Florida. So each state is almost like its own little country in the United States of America. And within each state, you're going to have its own prosecutorial jurisdiction. So we have 67 counties in Alabama, 41 state prosecutorial jurisdictions. And each one of those little prosecutorial jurisdictions, it's different on how you might have to make a case. That's based on judges. That's based on jury pool. That's based on, obviously, state law. The state law will be the same across the state, but how that state law is applied is different in each jurisdiction. Now think of that across this nation. And then you have an overall federal law, but because we are a nation of states that have state rights, go back to the 10th Amendment, the feds are limited in how they can approach many of these cases. That's why for the feds, and that's why what we do, we make the best state, the best local case that we can make for successful prosecution, and then the feds have the ability to adopt solid state cases that match their nexus. As far as the sentencing, I have been, at least across most of the southern states, I've been pretty happy with the sentencing aspect of what they've moved to. Like state of Alabama, if you're caught, trafficking a child, life in prison. Should be the death penalty, but again, we live in a time where that seems to be less. People have less of a stomach for that. With that being said, it's going to be more on your state to do that. And if the feds are involved, it's because a solid state case was generally already made.
Yeah. Do you think it would be a good idea, or would you advocate for a federal ability to supersede, or I don't know if I'm even using that word right, but basically have a federal blanket or umbrella that says, in this specific instance, if it's, sex trafficking of minors and it checks these few boxes, that no matter what the state or local jurisdiction says, this has to be a minimum punishment. Do you think that does that go against the Constitution?
Yeah, I would say no, because I want to take as much away from the federal government as possible.
Yeah.
Because if you can't throw your baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, or you can't. It's almost like we miss the forest for the trees. All these little sayings kind of explain when you give more power to the feds. It might be for a good thing initially, but one thing that we've seen with the feds, or just the government in general, is they abuse it unbelievably.
They'll use that on everything.
They'll wind up using it on everything. So next thing you know, they're going to use it on guns, right? And now they're negatively impacting the Second Amendment. So what I would rather see is our Constitution's in place for a reason. The state has a primary authority going all the way back to Blackstone. The closest form of government to the people is the most effective form of government. Leave it on your close form of government. Advocate, deal with your legislators, really get in and push at that local government level, at that state government level, at that local county level, all of those things are where you live, so that you can have more impact on your community.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my thought process, at least.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that, and hearing you explain it, in that, one, the first concern is that can be a slippery slope, but two, I think, it I think kind of highlights the laziness of your average citizen, and that I'd rather the federal government wave this wand.
That's right.
Instead of me going to the city council meeting and confronting, whoever, is in the position to make that change, why they aren't making that change. And, I think that's...
Or run for city council, run for county commissioner, anything that would impact it. It's a burden, but that's going to be the best way that you can impact it in your community. The feds don't have the bandwidth to impact it without handing everything over to them, and I just keep it out of the hands of the feds.
Man, I can't thank you enough for carving time out of your busy schedule to come sit and
Bro, thanks for having me.
Yeah, talk about your career and especially what you have going on now. Founder of the Covenant Rescue Group, founder of the Shooting Institute. Anything else that you want to push or plug before we wrap up?
Nah, man, go to covenantrescue.org and follow what we're doing. If you're a believer like I am, pray for us, pray for success. If you're not a believer, pray that God will reveal himself to you to be the person of Jesus Christ. I encourage you to accept him. And if you have the ability to write checks and donate, we run on donations. That's a big thing. It can be $10 a month, $100 a month, or if you can write a check for $100,000, it doesn't really matter. We are a grassroots effort, so if you want to support, we obviously would love and encourage your support, because we're doing real work, and we need funds to do real work.
You absolutely are. Thank you for your service, both in the military and subsequently helping keep our entire nation safer than it has been, and we obviously need the help. So I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you, brother.
A little gift from all of us here at the Mic Drop Studio. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming, and if you want to pop the box open, thanks to John Johnston Champion.
Oh man, that's awesome, dude.
So you got the shit kickers already. Now
I know. I was just going to throw this on my leather belt, and I'll be good to go, man. Awesome. That's great. Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming. For you guys, I hope it was an eye-opening and enlightening episode. I know it was for me. We've had a few other folks over the years talk about sex trafficking in the United States. It's obviously just as big of a problem. So I hope you go support Mr. Hudson and all of his efforts. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.